Chapter 234. Yu Qianzhou's mouth was slightly agape with a look of disbelief. It must be known that the stone walls of this cave had been roasted by the blazing fire below for many years without much change. Yet, a small ball of fire that he had casually flicked out was able to silently burn a hole in the stone wall. Wasn't this a little too powerful? He released his divine sense to investigate the small hole that was burnt out. It was at least 1 meter deep. Yu Qianzhou let out a breath of cold air. It was just a casual flick from him, but it actually had such power. Then, looking at the armor-like flame coat that enveloped his body, he raised a blazing fist and punched towards the wall. Hu Jinyuan quickly shot out with a fireball. Pung! A large hole appeared in the wall. Puff puff puff. The flames that had been compressed by Jinyuan shot out from his 10 fingers like a storm. Immediately, the cave was filled with charred holes. Amazing! Yu Qianzhou smiled with satisfaction. This was a good attack method. However, it seemed like the fire element stored in his body would decrease with every release. The commotion inside alerted the guards outside. 2 of his subordinates jumped in with swords in hand. When they saw Yu Qianzhou covered in flames, their faces were filled with shock. After pausing for a while, they saluted together and said, "Leader. There's nothing here. You guys go out." "That's right, fill this water tank with water," Yu Qianzhou said with a smile in the flames. "Yes." The 2 respectfully retreated. Not long after, water flowed in from a ditch that was dug out in the stone wall. After a while, a pool in the corner of the wall was filled with water. Yu Qianzhou retracted the flames on his body. He took out his flying sword and the mystical golden sand. He held the flying sword in one hand and the mystical golden sand in the other. He released his Jinyuan and forced the 2 items to float above his palm. Suddenly, 2 balls of red demonic flames appeared in his palm and wrapped around the flying sword and the mystical golden sand. The 2 items quickly turned into 2 balls of black and gold liquid. The 2 balls of flames immediately merged into one, and the 2 balls of liquid also fused together. Yu Qianzhou held up the flame with one hand. The flame wrapped around the liquid in his palm rotated rapidly. After thoroughly mixing the flying sword liquid and the mystical golden sand liquid, the flame was pulled up in his palm and elongated like a tornado. The metal liquid also gradually elongated, and a long sword began to take shape in the rotating flame. Suddenly, the shape of the flame changed and instantly turned into a fiery long sword. It gradually shrunk in size from the outside to the inside, and the liquid that was wrapped in it was compressed into a flying sword. Yu Qianzhou stared at the sword and waited for a while before nodding slightly. The long sword's flame-shaped coat quickly retracted from the hilt and retracted back into the palm of the hand from the sword tip. Yu Qianzhou cast a few spells at it. This was a necessary spell to refine a flying sword. Otherwise, no matter how good the sword was, it would not be able to become a royal flying sword. With a wave of his hand, the long sword flew into the air and stabbed straight into the water trough that was filled with water. Fart. A sharp sound rang out. After the water receded, the heat of the long sword was fixed, and it was directly inserted into the bottom of the pool. Yu Qianzhou reached into the water to grab the sword hilt and pulled it out. He bent his finger and flicked the sword. Whing! The long sword let out a crisp dragon roar. The layer of black impurities wrapped around the sword was shaken off, revealing a flying sword with a dark gold color. Yu Qianzhou flicked the sword twice and listened to the buzzing sound. He nodded in satisfaction and then casually slashed at the stone wall. With a light sound, the long sword penetrated into the stone wall and swept out again. It was as effortless as a knife cutting through tofu. Good sword. Yu Qianzhou gently stroked the sword and couldn't help but praise it. The most important thing in refining was the balance of the materials. Alchemy was also the same. The second thing was superb refining skills. Although he didn't have any superb refining skills, with his ability to control fire, he should be able to match the materials. His divine sense locked onto the flying sword in his hand and flew freely in the cave. Finally, with a dong sound, the sword was nailed into the stone wall. Still in high spirits, he picked up the flying swords and mysterious gold sand on the ground and started refining them one by one. When all the flying swords were mixed with mysterious gold sand and refined again, he found that the amount of mysterious gold sand was enough to refine another 100 flying swords. Back at the auction house, he knew that 10 kilograms of mysterious gold sand was enough to refine 200 flying swords. After thinking about it, he felt that even if he used all of them now, it would be useless. Even if he reached the middle stage of core formation, he wouldn't be able to fully unleash the power of 200 flying swords. It would already be very good if he could increase the power of 100 flying swords. Besides, if Chen Feng found out that he took something as good as the mysterious gold sand for himself, he would definitely nag him endlessly. It was better to leave some for him. With a wave of his hand, the 100 flying swords and mysterious gold sand nailed to the wall were all put away. Suddenly, his whole body trembled. Yu Qianqiu closed his eyes and let out a comfortable moan. Just like that, his cultivation broke through to the middle stage of core formation. It was simply too satisfying. Feeling refreshed, he walked out of the cave. His two subordinates at the cave entrance saluted in unison and said, "Leader. Where's your chief Chen?" Yu Qianqiu asked with his hands behind his back. One of them replied, "Chief Chen is in the alchemy room." The former nodded and said, "Go do your own things. There's no need to watch over me." With that said, he walked away. When he passed by another cave entrance, he suddenly heard someone whispering, "Strange. Did you notice that the temperature of the earth fire has been very unstable these past 2 days? It seems like it's a bit low." Someone replied, "That's right. I also think it's strange." When a cauldron of pills reached a crucial point, the temperature suddenly dropped. In the end, we wasted an entire cauldron of pills. However, the temperature seems to be gradually recovering. Yu Qianqiu listened for a while outside and thought to himself, could it be that they're affected by my fire art? Regardless of whether it's true or not, it seems like I can't absorb fire elements in my own territory in the future. If I want to do it, I have to do it outside. Inside the alchemy room, Chen Feng was squatting in a pile of spiritual herbs, rummaging through something. Suddenly, a flying sword stabbed right in front of him, giving him a fright. At the side, Yu Qianqiu chuckled and said, "What do you think of this flying sword I refined?" Chen Feng, who had a slightly unhappy expression on his face, casually pulled out the sword from the ground. It wasn't that he looked down on his boss. Yu Qianqiu's pill refining skills were better than his, but in the path of tool refining, Yu Qianqiu wasn't as proficient as him. Chen Feng originally wanted to tactfully attack his boss, but who knew that after taking a look, he would be stunned. He held the sword in front of his eyes with both hands and examined it closely. He mumbled, "The sword's body is one, the blade is sharp, and the color is dark gold. Boss, this flying sword has already reached the grade of a high-grade magic tool. Did you really refine it?" Chen Feng turned around and expressed his doubt. Yu Qianqiu chuckled and called back the flying sword in his hand. Then, he casually threw a bag of things to him and said, "This is for you." Chen Feng caught it and opened it to take a look. Then, he shook his head and said, "I say, so it's mixed with mystic gold sand. What a pity, it's such a waste to give something like this to you. Don't talk nonsense. We'll talk again when you can refine a sword better than this one." Yu Qianqiu couldn't be bothered with him and turned around to go back. A stream of light quickly flew out from the deep valley. Yu Qianqiu floated down to the top of Misty Peak. His cultivation had increased by 1 level, and in addition to the rebirth of the flying sword, the speed of the sword kinesis flight was indeed much faster. At this time, the sky outside was just beginning to brighten. Yu Qianqiu looked around and was instantly stunned. He saw Bai Suzhen standing on the cliff and looking at him. Smiling, he walked over and asked, "Why are you here?" Bai Suzhen smiled indifferently and turned back to look at the gradually fading stars in the sky. She said gently, "You stayed down there for more than a month. Previously, I saw you looking up at the stars every night. I thought it must be related to the stars, so I came to take a look." She naturally couldn't say that she saw him naked, so she thought of coming here to take a look. Yu Qianqiu took a few light steps forward and stood beside her. He smiled and said, "Sister is indeed smart. Not bad, I comprehended something from the changes in the starry sky. It's a pretty good incantation." "What incantation?" Bai Suzhen looked back and asked in surprise. Yu Qianqiu looked at her and took a few steps away. Suddenly, a raging fire burned around his body, illuminating the whole cliff. He, who was wrapped in the fire, casually took out an ordinary flying sword. The flying sword was wrapped in the raging fire and instantly turned into a ball of liquid, which fell to the ground and scattered. After the bewitching fire was restrained into his body, Yu Qianqiu shrugged disapprovingly, as if to tell her that it was this incantation. "What a powerful fire. I can feel its destructive power. I'm afraid that even with my cultivation, I will be burned by it." Brother is indeed a genius, to be able to comprehend such a powerful fire incantation from the changes in the starry sky. Bai Suzhen couldn't hide the admiration in her eyes. Since ancient times, who could create their own cultivation incantations was not a proud son of heaven. She was proud of him. Yu Qianqiu calmly accepted her praise. To be praised by such an outstanding woman was also a happy thing. He walked back to her side and looked at her with a smile. "Big sister, this incantation was created by me. It doesn't have a name yet. Big sister, please give it a name." "You want me to give it a name?" Bai Suzhen's tone revealed a hint of surprise. It should be known that the name of a newly created incantation was very likely to be passed down through the ages along with the name of the person who created the incantation, especially the more powerful incantation. It was rare for Yu Qianqiu to see her reveal such a little girl's expression. He nodded his head blankly. Bai Suzhen lowered her head and muttered to herself. She then raised her head to look at the already white night sky. Her gaze stopped on the most dazzling star for a while. She turned her head and smiled sweetly. "Star flame. Star as in stars, flame as in flames. What do you think about calling it star flame?" Yu Qianqiu's gaze also fell on the star. He nodded and said, "Star flame. All right, this fire incantation will be called Star Flame." The person who named it is Bai Suzhen. Chapter 235. After learning that he had stayed in the valley for more than a month, Yu Qianqiu went to inspect the troops. Seeing that the houses had been built and that the training was on track, he finally felt at ease. There was no need for him to worry about the other details. Otherwise, what was the point of having so many people? When he returned to the back garden of the Pillar of State General's residence, he realized that Shi Shaotian, Ling Feng, and the rest were not there. There were a few more mortals with spiritual roots in the garden, and he had recruited them into Utopia. When he walked past the entrance of the garden, he realized that there were many servants cleaning up the general's residence. There were lanterns and colored banners everywhere, and it looked very festive. "Mr. Yu," someone called out to him. Yu Qianqiu saw a smiling Shi Yutian running over and bowing. Yu Qianqiu pouted and said, "Is it going to be a festival? Or are you going to marry a concubine?" Shi Yutian felt awkward and smiled apologetically. "Yes, my father will be back tomorrow." "Oh. The Pillar of State General is coming back." Yu Qianqiu nodded and said, "Find me 10 sets of clothes for the servants, the ones I wore last time." The set that Shi Shaotian had given him had turned into ashes in the valley, so he had to get a few more sets as backup. Shi Yutian nodded repeatedly and trotted away. Not long after, he personally came back with 10 sets of clothes for the servants. Yu Qianqiu immediately changed his clothes in the garden and walked out of the back garden. Shi Yutian followed behind and said with a smile, "Mister, are you going out?" Yutian is quite familiar with the capital. "Do you want me to lead the way?" Just as he finished speaking, he saw the 2 beautiful wives of the Shi family blocking his way. The 2 ladies wanted to bow to Yu Qianqiu, but they were stopped by Yu Qianqiu. "There's no need to be so polite. When there are many people, I'm a servant of the general's residence." He then bowed to the 2 ladies instead. Si Tuhui tilted her body slightly. Although she did not know who he was, she did not dare to accept his courtesy. On the other hand, Bao Wancher was not interested in him. She accepted his bow and complained to her husband, "Where are you going?" "Madam, I'm going out with Mr." He was looking forward to building a good relationship with Yu Qianqiu. Who would have thought that Yu Qianqiu, who was at the side, would laugh and say, "I'm going to 10,000 Flower Tower for a stroll. Do you really want to go?" After saying that, he directly walked out. He looked like he wasn't going to stop him. How could Bao Wancher agree? Sure, Yu Tian was immediately stopped by his wife, who would not let him go. Si Tu Hui, who was at the side, smiled faintly. She looked at Yu Qianqiu, who was walking away, and shook her head gently. She did not believe that such a person would go to a dirty place like a brothel. He must have done it on purpose to anger her sister-in-law. This was just her wishful thinking. In fact, Yu Qianqiu really did go to a brothel. However, he didn't go to visit a prostitute. There were too many people in the capital. It was not convenient for him to fly around in the city during the day. If he wanted to leave the city directly, he would fly out. He took out some silver and ate snacks all the way to Myriad Flower Brothel. As soon as he arrived, someone naturally led him in. The winding path led to a secluded place. Behind Myriad Flower Brothel, there was a courtyard that was not small. Ordinary guests could not enter. Such a secluded place in the bustling capital was indeed suitable for living. This was the second time he came here. There was a faint sound of a zither in a small attic deep in the courtyard. Yu Qianqiu could tell that it was a song he taught. He shook his head and went up alone. As soon as he walked up to the attic, the sound of the zither stopped. The allure beauty shouted from inside, "Come in by yourself." After he pushed the door open and went in, he still bowed and greeted, "Mistress." This time, the allure beauty did not tease him like before. She leaned on the zither and rested her chin on her hand. She looked at him and sighed, "Ang Kwangsung and Daluo sect are really unlucky to have provoked you. Especially Ang Kwangsung. Now, he can be considered to have been removed from the cultivation world. This is all thanks to Mistress Information. You've been a great help," Yu Qianqiu said respectfully. The allure beauty giggled and lazily leaned back on the chair. She shook her head and said, "Yu Qianqiu, you're really good at scheming. First, you looted the spirit stone mines of the two great sects and killed all the disciples in the mines. Then, you lured Ang Kwangsung to send people to guard the mines again. When Ang Kwangsung's sect was at its weakest, you led people to attack Ang Kwangsung again. In the end, you took down Ang Kwangsung in one fell swoop." Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He scratched his head and said, "Mistress, what do you mean by this? Why don't I understand? When did I attack Ang Kwangsung? Keep pretending. Keep pretending." The allure beauty sneered and said, "Don't tell me that the hero's men aren't your men. I admit that the hero is my men, but I only looted the 21 spirit stone mines." "Mistress, you're saying that someone attacked Ang Kwangsung?" Yu Qianqiu was stunned. "You didn't do it?" The allure beauty was puzzled. Yu Qianqiu smiled bitterly and said, "Mistress, I did it. Is there a need to hide it from you? I did the spirit stone mines, but I really didn't attack Ang Kwangsung. Mistress, what's going on? Quickly tell me." The allure beauty couldn't laugh anymore. She stood up and sized up Yu Qianqiu. Seeing that he didn't seem to be lying, she muttered, "If you didn't do it, then this matter is a little fishy." Her graceful figure circled around the zither platform. She thought for a moment and said, "Half a month ago, not long after Ang Kwangsung sent people to guard the 6 spirit stone mines, a group of powerful black-clothed masked people suddenly attacked Mount Qingguang. Ang Kwangsung's tribulation passing stage Qing Nu and ancestor Qing Fu died in battle. Other than the disciples outside, almost everyone else died. Afterwards, someone left a small black flag in Ang Kwangsung. On it, there were 2 golden words, "Hero." I originally thought that it was you. But now that I think about it, I'm afraid that the person behind this matter isn't so simple. What? Yu Qianqiu squinted his eyes. He pinched his chin and said in a deep voice, in other words, someone did his own thing, but poured dirty water on the hero's banner. Master's wife, who do you think would do such a thing? I can't guess. The 100-charm beauty frowned and said, I originally thought that it was you. So I didn't urge my subordinates to investigate this matter. Then I'll have to ask Master's wife to investigate. Yu Qianqiu sneered and said, how could it be so easy to frame me? Some people are tired of living. There was still one thing he didn't say. He was worried that he couldn't find someone to test the power of his Starflame fire technique. The 100-charm beauty heard the trace of coldness in his words. She nodded to him and said, don't worry. My 10,000 flower houses information channels are everywhere. As long as you didn't do it, even if we can't thoroughly investigate it, we will still find some clues. Unless he fell from the sky and disappeared on the ground, that's more likely. How could Yu Qianqiu not understand the meaning in her words? This, fell from the sky and disappeared on the ground, was probably referring to what his group had done last time. She probably also investigated it. Unfortunately, his group was really similar to falling from the sky and disappearing on the ground. He smiled and said, how long do you think it will take for Master's wife to find some clues? When it comes to investigating information, if my 10,000 flower house is second, I'm afraid no one can be first. 3 days. 3 days is enough. Come back after 3 days. The 100-charm beauty was obviously very confident in her ability to investigate information. Otherwise, she wouldn't have said such words. She said with a charming smile, after I give you the information, I'll leave it to you to deal with it. I want to see who is more powerful, the real hero or the fake hero. Chapter 236. Yu Qianqiu gave a noncommittal smile and didn't make any comments. According to his own estimation, maybe the fake hero was more powerful than the real one. He admitted that he didn't have an expert who could kill 2 crossing tribulation final stage cultivators at once. Although Bai Suzhen was also at the crossing tribulation final stage, it was hard to say if she could defeat 2 at once. Moreover, Ang Guangsong definitely had other crossing tribulation final stage experts. Otherwise, he would have already gone to Qingguang Mountain to find trouble with Ang Guangsong. Master's wife, during this time, did anything new happen in the cultivation world? Yu Qianqiu naturally wouldn't let a master's wife who was familiar with the cultivation world go to waste. Nothing new, but there is an old thing. The new talent assembly that is held once every 10 years will be held at Supporting Immortals Island in 6 days. This year, Ang Guangsong will definitely be absent. AI. It's a pity that you have already been expelled from Supporting Immortals Island. Otherwise, you would also be able to witness this grand occasion. The 100-charm beauty teased. It's a bit of a pity. Yu Qianqiu shook his head in agreement. He thought to himself, how do you know that I won't be able to witness this grand occasion? As long as I want to go to Supporting Immortals Island, I can go at any time. However, these words naturally couldn't be said out loud. The news of the pillar of the State General returning to the capital with 10,000 guards had already spread throughout the capital. It was said that His Majesty the Emperor would personally come out of the city to welcome them. The common people naturally didn't want to give up on this opportunity. To be able to see His Majesty the pillar of the State General was a rare thing. Therefore, the streets were filled with people. Yu Qianqiu was normally a person who liked crowds. Naturally, he also wanted to join in on the fun. However, this time, because His Majesty the Emperor would personally come out of the city to welcome them, the number of people that could go out to welcome them was limited. Therefore, Shi Yu Tian, who was in charge of this stall, personally arranged for him to be part of the welcoming team. Lady Li, 2 sons, 2 daughters-in-law, these were the family members. The housekeeper and 4 servants were just in accordance with the rule that a master couldn't have more than 1 servant. Among the servants, there were 3 maidservants. Only the housekeeper and Yu Qianqiu were male. Naturally, it was to make it easier for them to serve their mistress. At the west gate of the capital, the Shi family's master and servant had already arrived at the city gate. Although it was early in the morning, the sun was still quite fierce. Fortunately, they were at the west gate, so the sun wouldn't reach them for a while. Everyone could hide under the tall city walls. As for the top of the city gate tower, His Majesty was up there. The main road out of the city was guarded by layers of majestic imperial guards, not allowing anyone to get close. The family members of the Pillar of the State General were the only exceptions and were allowed to leave the city. Yu Qianzhou looked up from time to time from the city wall. He had never seen what the legendary emperor looked like, and he really wanted to see it. Little Tian, that old man in yellow on the city wall is the emperor? Yu Qianzhou suddenly saw a guy in yellow robes appear on the city wall. He seemed to be very powerful, so he pulled Shi Xiaotian aside and asked. As soon as he said this, everyone's expression changed. Li Hongniang's expression was a bit awkward, but she didn't know what to say. Shi Yutian hurriedly looked at the imperial guards over there. They were quite far away, so he didn't think they could hear him. He then wiped the cold sweat off his forehead. Bao Wanshi, on the other hand, was a bit dumbfounded. Someone actually dared to talk about His Majesty like that? Si Tuhui's eyes also flickered. The housekeeper lowered his head, and the three maidservants were a bit scared. They didn't know why this new servant was so daring. Not only did he call their master's name, he even dared to look down on His Majesty. Shi Xiaotian didn't raise his head, but smiled bitterly and said, "Boss, can you not do this? You've already crossed the line. According to the law, you will be beheaded." Those who could come here to greet them were all the Shi family's trusted subordinates. Yu Qianzhou didn't care about what he said. He said disdainfully, "Behead me? You can ask him to try. If he gets angry, I will kick him down from the city gate tower right now." Hearing this, everyone was terrified. If these words were to spread, what would happen? Shi Xiaotian almost begged, "Boss, lower your voice. The emperor is protected by the imperial preceptor. The imperial preceptor isn't an ordinary person. He has a high cultivation." Yu Qianzhou was slightly stunned. He remembered something. It seemed that before Bai Suzhen was imprisoned in Anquansung, she had fought with an imperial preceptor. Thinking about this, he really restrained himself a little. About an hour later, there was movement on the city gate tower. Not long after, a group of civil and military officials escorted a yellow-robed elder out of the city gate. As a family member, she couldn't go to the main road to greet them. She could only follow from the side protected by the imperial guards. As if it was rehearsed, everyone immediately felt a buzzing vibration under their feet. Following that, the neighing of war horses came from afar. When a banner could be seen fluttering in the distance, a general in silver armor had already leaped up the slope. Immediately, a row of generals in battle armor followed behind him. Suddenly, a black mass of cavalry appeared behind them, and with a rumble, they followed the general in front. If this group of people didn't stop and directly charged over, what would the situation be like? The momentum of the tens of thousands of horses galloping over was astonishing. Even the ground over here was trembling. Yu Qianzhou sized up the civil and military officials on the main road. Many of their faces had already changed. It was obvious that they were frightened. Looking at the Shi family's side, they were all pleasantly surprised. It was the joy of seeing the master of the family, and a very powerful one at that. Yu Qianzhou shook his head and sighed softly, "Sigh. I only said a few words and people said I was overstepping my authority." Great General Shi made such a big commotion. Doesn't he know that the emperor is here to greet him? Is he putting on a show to scare the emperor, or is he here to attack the capital? Although his voice was soft, it was enough for the few masters in front to hear. It was unknown whether he was speaking to himself or to others. The Shi family's family members trembled when they heard this. They all turned to look at the main road's emperor. They saw an elder with a sword on his back, who was originally behind the emperor, take a step forward and stand next to the emperor. It seemed like he was protecting the emperor. This time, the Shi family couldn't be happy. It was obvious that they had really frightened the emperor. Yu Qianzhou only saw it now. When he saw that person's clothing, he was stunned. Wasn't that the clothing of Fuxian Island? He couldn't help but ask, "Who is that old man with the sword on his back?" "He is the current imperial preceptor." Shi Tian sighed. After being pointed out by Yu Qianqiu, he could also see that his father was a little rash today. Yu Qianqiu nodded silently. No wonder the Li family's dynasty was supported by Fuxian Island. It was indeed so. The silver-armored general at the front suddenly raised his hand and waved when he was about 100 meters away from the welcoming guards. The dense mass of cavalry behind him abruptly reined in their horses and stopped abruptly. It was truly an order that was strictly enforced. The general also slowed down. He rode his horse to a stop about 10 meters away from the guards of honor. He jumped off his horse and threw the reins. There was already someone running over to hold the horse for him. The state pillar general strode in front of the emperor and knelt on one knee. He said, "Subject Shi Wenguang greets your majesty." When he knelt, the army 100 meters away also got off their horses and knelt together. "Long live your majesty." The shouts shook the sky. Just this formation made the blood of those watching feel a little hot. They were indeed an elite army that had been on the battlefield for a long time. At this moment, the old emperor finally smiled. He waved his hand and signaled for all the soldiers to rise. The imperial preceptor beside him said loudly, "His Majesty has an order. Rise." His voice was louder than a loudspeaker. It immediately showed the imperial preceptor's ability. After that, there was a scene of love between the emperor and his subjects. Yu Qianqiu wasn't interested in that. What he cared about was how deep the imperial preceptor's cultivation was. However, it was clearly higher than his because he couldn't see through it. In the end, the general's 10,000 guards set up camp outside the city. The general himself received the honor of being in the same carriage as the emperor. He went directly to the palace and the palace prepared a banquet for him. The great general's family only had a quick meeting with him, which was considered a greeting. To Yu Qianqiu, he was just here to watch the show. When he came back, he would do what he had to do. He planned to stay for a few days and wait for the 100 Charms beauty to get news about the fake hero. Then, he would go to Fuxian Island to see if he could see the new talent assembly that was held once every 10 years. After 2 days, Yu Qianqiu wanted to find the 100 Charms beauty. However, he saw Shi Xiaotian walking in with an unhappy expression. He couldn't help but ask, "What happened?" Shi Xiaotian shook his head and said, "It's nothing. Today, during the morning court, someone criticized my father. He said that my father has an army and often follows him. He wants His Majesty to take back my father's military power." Yu Qianqiu smiled and took over the topic. Then, the old emperor rejected that person's criticism and reprimanded him. "He even praised your father." Shi Xiaotian was stunned. "Who told you that?" "It just happened not long ago. My big brother told me when he came back." "How did you know?" "Damn. I've seen too many TV dramas in my previous life." Yu Qianqiu put on an unfathomable expression and smiled. "I don't need anyone to tell me. I guessed it the moment you said it." Then, he walked around the hall with his hands behind his back and sighed. "If I'm not wrong, this is just the beginning. There will still be people who will continue to criticize your father." Sigh. "Looks like your Shi family has reached a point of life and death." His words were too alarmist. Shi Xiaotian was shocked. His expression twitched. "Boss, you must be joking. A general who can command millions of people can't be stupid." Yu Qianqiu patted his shoulder and sighed. "Help me send a message to your father. I believe he will understand." "What message?" Seeing that his boss didn't seem to be joking, he became nervous. "Peace is decided by the general. He is not allowed to see peace." Yu Qianqiu sighed. "Tell your father. He will naturally know what it means. I'm going out to do something." Then, he wobbled out. As he walked, he shook his head and said, "It's all because of military power." Chapter 237. When Yu Qianqiu arrived at Myriad Flower House's side courtyard loft, the allure beauty immediately tossed a jade archive to him. Yu Qianqiu inserted his divine sense into the jade archive and took a look. To his surprise, it was a topographic map. Based on the markings, it was clearly located in a deep mountain not far from the Hundred Flowers Valley. Yu Qianqiu asked, "Mistress, what is this?" The allure beauty was lazily lying on her side on the soft couch. Her body was moving up and down. She supported her cheek with one hand and said with a smile, "There is a small village there. The people in the village rely on hunting for a living. There used to be a cave deep in the mountains nearby. However, for some reason, the cave suddenly disappeared more than 10 years ago. It wasn't until the day Kwangsung was attacked that a villager accidentally discovered the cave reappeared and saw hundreds of people entering it. The villager thought it was strange and wanted to see who those people were. However, when he got closer, he discovered that the cave had disappeared again. When my men arrived, they discovered that the cave had been sealed off by a formation." Yu Qianqiu waved the jade archive in his hand and asked, "The small village that mistress mentioned is here?" The temptress nodded coquettishly from her couch. "Mistress, are you saying that the attack on Kwangsung has something to do with the Hundred Flowers Valley?" Yu Qianqiu frowned. Speaking of the Hundred Flowers Valley, he recalled the 4 treasures of the Snow Valley that were auctioned off by the Wu clan. That Yan Zhuixing was very mysterious. "I don't know if it has anything to do with the Hundred Flowers Valley, but I'm guessing that the incident with Kwangsung must have something to do with these hundreds of people. The location of the cave is in your jade archive. If you're interested, you can go check it out yourself." The temptress smiled. Yu Qianqiu put away the jade archive and clicked his tongue, "Mistress, you're amazing indeed. You even know what happened in a small village in the secular world. Stop flattering me. If you have the time to flatter me, you might as well massage my legs." The allure beauty giggled. As she spoke, a fair and plump jade-like leg stretched out from the red muslin. In the end, Yu Qianqiu was so embarrassed that he found a random excuse and ran away. He was afraid of his mistress. If this continued, he reckoned that one day he would be tempted to the point where he would lose his sense of propriety. 2 days later, Yu Qianqiu was sitting in the main hall of the general's mansion's back garden. He was tapping on the table and counting the time. In one more day, it would be the new talent assembly on Fuxian Island. However, the people who were supposed to come were not here yet. Unknowingly, the sky had already darkened. Shi Xiaotian hurriedly walked in and said, "Boss, my father wants to see you." Yu Qianqiu laughed coldly in his heart. "Still putting on airs in front of me? I don't care what great general you are." He crossed his legs and leisurely shook his head, saying, "I'm not going." Shi Xiaotian was startled. He didn't expect that his boss wouldn't give him face and was begging him. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and interrupted, "Don't say any more. If your father really wants to see me, ask him to come over personally. I don't want to interfere in his matters. Seeing him is already giving you face." "Boss, you." Sigh. Shi Xiaotian stomped his feet and turned to leave. Not long later, Shi Xiaotian led a tall and sturdy middle-aged man in. It was the pillar of the state general, Shi Wenguang. Yu Qianqiu sat on the chair and didn't move. He smiled and sized up the person who came. This great general was wearing a plain robe, but it couldn't conceal his imposing aura. Especially that domineering aura. It was obvious that he had been in a high position for a long time and tempered by blood and iron. The two of them sized each other up. Shi Xiaotian, who was at the side, felt a little awkward. The introduction was already a little redundant. At this moment, a person slowly walked out from the back of the main hall. The burly Guan Yu, who wore green robes and a green hat, stood at Yu Qianqiu's side with an extraordinary air and a sword at his waist. Guan Yu raised his hand and stroked his long beard. He narrowed his eyes coldly at Shi Wenguang. Guan Yu's bearing was rare in the world. Coupled with the fact that he had led troops in Utopia for many years, there was nothing to say about his bearing. Shi Wenguang took a glance and cheered inwardly, "What a great man." However, Shi Xiaotian felt that Guan Yu looked familiar. He didn't know where he had seen him before. However, the atmosphere of his father and his boss opposing each other made him feel a little uncomfortable. Yu Qianzhou, on the other hand, was a little displeased with Shi Wenguang's dignified appearance. Therefore, he got the more dignified Guan Yu to hold the fort. Yu Qianzhou looked at the anxious Shi Shaotian and looked like he was giving him face. He stood up and cupped his hands at Shi Wenguang. "Pillar of the State General, I've heard a lot about you." Shi Wenguang also cupped his fists and said, "I've also heard a lot about Mr. Yu's fame in the cultivation world. I didn't expect you to be a guest in my residence." "Oh. Does the general know about the cultivation world as well?" Yu Qianzhou was a little surprised. He looked at Shi Shaotian. It seemed like Shi Shaotian didn't know much about him in the cultivation world. "Mr. saved my son in Anquangsung and then joined Fuxian Island. He beat up the grandson of Anquangsung's sect leader in Hundred Flowers Valley. He beat up the grandson of Daluo sect leader in Hat Island. After that, he killed the grandson of Anquangsung's sect leader. Now, he's been expelled from Fuxian Island, causing a storm in the cultivation world. Some people even suspect that the looting of Daluo sect and Anquangsung's spirit stone mines, as well as the extermination of Anquangsung's entire family, was also done by Mr. Everyone in the cultivation world knows about what Mr. has done." Shi Wenguang revealed Yu Qianzhou's deeds in the cultivation world as if he was familiar with them. Yu Qianzhou and Guan Yu looked at each other. They clapped and smiled. "Amazing. As expected of the pillar of the nation. Even the matters of the cultivation world can't be hidden from you." Shi Wenguang also smiled. Mr. took a stroll in the courtyard when the entire cultivation world put a bounty on his head, but no one could do anything to him. "I'm also very impressed." Shi Shaotian was puzzled. "Father, I don't know about these things." "How did you know?" "After you joined the cultivation world, I spent a lot of manpower and money to finally get to know a few rogue cultivators. My purpose was to understand your situation. Who knew that they were just SOSO in the cultivation world? I accidentally learned about Mr. Yu's name from them. Although I don't know much about the cultivation world, I can see that they admire Mr. very much. Mr. seems to be a legend in the cultivation world," Shi Wenguang explained. "It's just a bandit's name. It's not worth mentioning." Yu Qianzhou waved his hand and smiled bitterly. "I wonder if the rogue cultivators that you know about me in the general's residence?" Shi Wenguang understood that he was afraid that the rogue cultivators would leak the secret of him being in the general's residence. He immediately waved his hand. "Don't worry, Mr. I understand some things. If Mr.'s whereabouts are leaked, our Shi family will be involved in the disputes of the cultivation world. That will be a disaster." Seeing that Shi Wenguang understood everything, Yu Qianzhou smiled. "Let's get back to the main topic. Why did you want to see me?" "I have a lot of troops in my hands. Some people are already panicking. I'm afraid that a storm is coming for me. Mr. wants my son to bring a message to me. Don't you want to help me?" Shi Wenguang said indifferently. "It's easy to talk to smart people." Yu Qianzhou turned his head and asked, "What does the general plan to do?" "Peace is decided by the general. I won't allow the general to see peace." Mr.'s words hit the nail on the head. My only mistake wasn't pacifying the 6 nations. As long as the war continues, my Shi family might be able to survive for a long time. Now, I'm afraid that I will have to hand over my military power. I'm afraid that some people won't let my Shi family off even after I hand over my military power. This is also the reason why I've been hesitating for the past few days." Shi Wenguang's words could be considered honest. "Haha. Since you came to see me today, you must have made up your mind. That's good. You're a smart man, so I won't beat around the bush." Yu Qianzhou's expression turned solemn. "The military power is your capital to protect your family. You can't hand it over. In short, you must control your troops. Once the opportunity comes, you must directly replace the Li dynasty." Shi Shaotian was dumbfounded. His father frowned. That's not difficult. It's just that the Lee family has the support of the cultivation world supporting Immortals Island. Does Mr. have a way to resolve this worry? The cultivation world won't interfere in the secular world's affairs. General only needs to conserve your energy and don't stir up trouble. Supporting Immortals Island won't brazenly interfere in the secular world's affairs. Otherwise, they won't be able to explain themselves in the cultivation world. As for some small troubles, there will naturally be people to resolve them for you. When the opportunity comes, I will inform you to mobilize the army. Yu Qianqiu smiled. Mister, why are you helping my Shi family? Shi Wenguang finally voiced out his doubts. First, I won't ignore Xiaotian's troubles. Second, supporting Immortals Island has been the #1 in the cultivation world for a long time. It's time for someone else to take over. Third, I want my family to have a peaceful life. Yu Qianqiu smiled. Is General satisfied with this explanation? At this moment, Shi Youtian's voice came from outside. Is father in? The Imperial Preceptor is here. Chapter 238. The few people in the hall exchanged glances. Shi Wenguang frowned and said, "What is he doing here?" Grand Preceptor, this is a forbidden area. Before Shi Yutian could finish his sentence, he heard another person snort coldly. Following that, Shi Youtian's pleading voice could be heard. Grand Preceptor, Grand Preceptor. Shi Wenguang looked at Yu Qianqiu. Seeing that the latter nodded, he shouted, "Yu Tian, let him in." At the same time, Yu Qianqiu said to Guan Yu, "Yunchang, step aside." After saying that, he sent him back to Utopia. The Shi father and son, who were watching the door, did not notice Guan Yu's sudden disappearance. Shi Yutian accompanied an old man with a sword on his back in fear and trepidation. The latter walked past them arrogantly and arrived at the top of the hall. He then turned around to size them up. Yu Qianqiu, who was dressed like a servant, did not attract his attention. His gaze landed on Shi Xiaotian and paused. He said with slight surprise, "General Shi, this must be the third young master." He could clearly see through Shi Xiaotian's cultivation, but he could not see through Yu Qianqiu. That's right. Shi Wenguang did not hold back. With Yu Qianqiu here, he more or less had some confidence. Although he did not know how powerful Yu Qianqiu was, he could tell from the itinerant cultivators he knew that Yu Qianqiu should be someone important in the cultivation world. His abilities should not be too bad. Unbeknownst to him, Yu Qianqiu's cultivation was only at the middle stage of the core formation realm. It was far inferior to the Grand Preceptor's early stage nascent soul cultivation. Yu Tian, leave us first. Shi Wenguang seemed to sense that the Grand Preceptor had come with ill intentions. He first ordered the civil official's son, who could not be of much help, to leave. The Grand Preceptor looked at Shi Xiaotian and stroked his beard. I didn't expect the third young master of the general's residence to be at the middle stage of the foundation establishment realm. This is really surprising. May I know which sect you are from? He had to ask clearly. He was here on a mission. It would not be good if he offended some powerful sect. My son is just a rogue cultivator. He doesn't belong to any sect. Shi Wenguang naturally wouldn't say that his son was An Quansung's son. Even if he said it now, it would be useless. An Quansung's family had already been exterminated. It would be shameful to say it. Moreover, his son had escaped and returned. He cupped his fists and said, "Imperial Preceptor, what brings you here so late at night?" Hearing that he was just a rogue cultivator, the State Preceptor's attitude became a little more arrogant. He looked at Shi Wenguang with an expressionless face and said, "His Majesty has a message for me to pass on to you." His Majesty said that there are people who are denouncing General for raising troops for self-importance. Initially, I did not want to pay attention to them. However, the denouncing has been incessant these few days and it seems to be getting more and more intense. I am deeply disturbed by it. On second thought, for the peace of the imperial court and your reputation, it might not be a bad thing for you to hand over your military power. So I sent the imperial advisor to persuade you not to disappoint me. General Sure, I have conveyed His Majesty's decree. What do you think? His Majesty is still waiting for me to report back. The state preceptor stared at Shi Wenguang and said coldly. Shi Wenguang glanced at Yu Qianzhou and sneered, I don't know what wrong I have done that His Majesty wants to take away my military power. What if I am not willing to hand it over? The state preceptor said with a smile, His Majesty also said that General has worked hard for many years and has made great contributions. It is better for you to return from the border early to rest. If General really wants to disobey my good intentions, the state preceptor can handle it according to the circumstances. Shi Wenguang glared at him and a murderous aura rose. He said in a deep voice, How does the state preceptor intend to handle it according to the circumstances? The state preceptor laughed sinisterly, General Shi, since the words have been spoken, I will tell you clearly. Either you take the initiative to resign from His Majesty during the morning assembly tomorrow, or I will execute you, the traitor who disobeyed His Majesty's orders, right now. You can choose between the two. General Shi, I believe you are aware of my methods. Don't count on luck. Hee hee. I am dying of laughter. When there is no tiger in the mountain, the monkey acts as the king. Since when did supporting Immortal Island have such an arrogant person? He is even more arrogant than Feng Shangtian. Yu Qianzhou no longer had the appearance of a servant with his head lowered. He chuckled with his hands behind his back. As soon as Yu Qianzhou spoke, Shi Wenguang's heart that was hanging in the balance was at ease. He cupped his hands at him and said, Mister, how do you think I should reply to the state preceptor? The state preceptor was looking at the servant in front of him in shock. This person actually knew about supporting Immortal Island and sect master Feng Shangtian? Yu Qianzhou stared at him coldly and put on a fake smile. What bullsh *T state preceptor? Reply my ass. Who exactly are you? The state preceptor's tone was slightly flustered. At first, he thought that the other party was an ordinary person. Only now did he realize that it was because he couldn't see through the other party's cultivation. He was originally a nascent soul realm cultivator of supporting Immortal Island. On the path of cultivation, there was no hope for him to improve, so he came to the secular world to be the state preceptor. This state preceptor might seem impressive in the eyes of the secular world, but in the eyes of the disciples of supporting Immortal Island, it was a place that they weren't willing to come to. Which cultivator would be willing to act like a watchdog and protect a mortal? So what if that mortal was the emperor? As long as one had a bit of cultivation, it was easy for them to enjoy anything they wanted in the secular world. However, those with low cultivation couldn't come, and those with high cultivation couldn't be bothered to come. Thus, every generation of state preceptor, supporting Immortal Island would choose an average nascent soul realm cultivator. To put it bluntly, if the people from the cultivation world wanted to cause trouble, how could a nascent soul realm cultivator stop them? In short, as long as supporting Immortal Island didn't fall, the dynasty that it supported wouldn't fall. It was the duty of the cultivators sent to protect the emperor. However, it was a disgrace to the supporting Immortal Island to act like a lackey to the emperor. Humph. Yu Qianzhou snorted and said proudly with his hands behind his back, Yu Qianzhou. Ah. You are Yu Qianzhou? State preceptor exclaimed and his face turned pale. The person in front of him was actually Yu Qianzhou, who caused chaos in the cultivation world. He didn't expect to meet him. He didn't know whose cultivation was higher, but a person's reputation was like a tree's shadow. How could a person who could kill sect leader Ang Kwangsung be someone with an undeserved reputation? The long sword on his back was already in his hand. He looked at Yu Qianzhou and hurriedly retreated to the door. Shi Wenguang revealed a trace of surprise. Although he had heard of Yu Qianzhou's deeds, he didn't have a direct understanding of it. He didn't expect that Yu Qianzhou's name could scare the state preceptor to this extent. Shi Xiaotian's face was filled with envy. Boss had actually become so powerful after leaving him for so many years. Yu Qianzhou closed in step by step and sneered, "Since you know my name, do you think I will let you go?" With a "hoo" sound, a ball of bright red flames suddenly ignited around his body. The surrounding wooden furniture and other things were immediately roasted to the point of sizzling and emitting smoke, as if they were going to catch on fire at any time. Shi Wenguang, who was at the back, was on the verge of collapsing from the high temperature. He couldn't even breathe through his nose and mouth. Shi Xiaotian immediately released his vital energy to protect his father and retreat far away. However, from the looks of it, he wouldn't be able to hold on for long. Yu Qianzhou didn't expect the fire to be so powerful. He immediately suppressed the temperature of the fire. Otherwise, not only would the house burn, but even the state pillar general would also be roasted. He had already become a man of fire, but he was still sneering in the fire. It made everyone's hair stand on end. What kind of magic art was this? The state preceptor was already dumbfounded. By the time he reacted and wanted to run, he only saw a red light flash past on both sides. The door had already been sealed by a sea of fire. He looked to his left, right, and roof. There was no fire on the ground, but he didn't know how to burrow underground. Since he was forced to this point, he could only give it his all. There was no point in being afraid. The flying sword in his hand flashed and turned into a cold light that shot towards Yu Qianzhou. Yu Qianzhou snorted coldly and pointed with his finger. A pillar of fire shot towards the flying sword. However, the state preceptor's cultivation was much higher than Yu Qianzhou's. The flying sword immediately forced Yu Qianzhou's pillar of fire back. However, the fire released by the latter was too powerful. When the flying sword was about a meter away from Yu Qianzhou, it had already turned into liquid metal and flowed on the ground. Yu Qianzhou immediately swung his palm towards the state preceptor. He clenched his fist and the surrounding wall of fire wrapped around the state preceptor. Ah! The state preceptor didn't even manage to scream before he turned into nothingness. When Yu Qianzhou opened his fist again, the raging fire was quickly sucked back into his palm. A pile of ashes belonging to the state preceptor scattered on the ground. Chapter 239. After restraining the flames, Yu Qianzhou felt an indescribable sense of satisfaction. This was the first time he used his own strength to kill an original infant stage cultivator. He didn't expect it to be so easy. After reaching the middle stage of core formation, his ability to control fire had improved. The few guards of the general's mansion were standing outside at this time. The commotion just now had alarmed them, but as soon as they arrived outside, they saw that the raging fire had sealed the door. When they saw a flaming man inside putting away the raging fire, they all looked at each other in dismay. Shi Wenguang stepped out and waved his hand. The guards bowed and jumped over the wall. Yu Qianzhou of the cultivation world lives up to his name. My horizons have been broadened today. Shi Wenguang stepped back and clapped his hands in amazement. He didn't have the chance to see such a scene usually. Amazing! Amazing! Shi Xiaotian exclaimed in admiration as he touched the furniture that was already giving off the smell of burnt wood. Yu Qianzhou wasn't going to be blinded by the father and son's praise. He said solemnly, "There's no time to lose. General, leave the city and meet up with the army outside. It's best to return to the western border tonight." This. Shi Wenguang looked outside and hesitated. Knowing that he was worried about his family, Yu Qianzhou shouted, "Call your mother, brother, and sister-in-law over." Understood. Shi Xiaotian ran out quickly. "General, please listen to me. First, as long as you return to the western border as soon as possible, the Shi residence will be the safest place. Second, with your family here, the emperor will know that you won't rebel. He won't dare to provoke you. Third, when you return, try not to stir up trouble with the imperial court. Just do what you need to do, just do what you need to do. In short, make sure that the 2 million soldiers are firmly in your hands. As long as the Li family dynasty is not in a precarious situation, supporting Immortal Island will not interfere with worldly affairs. This will give us time to decide the outcome of the battle." Yu Qianzhou quickly analyzed the situation. Sigh. My Shi clan has been loyal for generations. I didn't think it would end up like this. Shi Wenguang sighed and a trace of decisiveness flashed across his face. He nodded. Mr. is right. It's decided. It's good that General understands. After Yu Qianzhou finished speaking, he waved his hand, and a group of black-clothed masked men appeared on both sides. He had just contacted Guan Yu with his divine sense and arranged this. Shi Wenguang looked at the two sides in astonishment. He had led troops for a long time, so he could naturally feel the military temperament of these two teams. Yu Qianzhou didn't explain to him, so he didn't ask. However, Yu Qianzhou's extraordinary ability to make people appear out of thin air made him more confident. Not long after, the Shi family arrived at the back garden that was normally off-limits. When they saw the two groups of black-clothed men, they were shocked. Everyone except Shi Xiaotian was baffled to learn that the great general was going to rush back to the western border overnight. Wasn't he coming all the way here to attend the royal wedding? Why did they have to go back so soon? In the face of his wife's earnest inquiry, Shi Wenguang felt a little guilty. However, sometimes there was no need for his family to worry too much about what a man did, so there was no need for him to explain. Shi Wenguang glanced at the members of the Gu family and shouted, "Guards!" 7 or 8 people immediately appeared from outside. They were the Shi family's henchmen, and they walked over to greet the great general. Shi Wenguang nodded and suddenly bowed to Yu Qianzhou. "I'll leave the safety of my family in Mr.'s hands." He was entrusting his family to Yu Qianzhou in front of everyone, causing the group of people to look at each other in dismay. They didn't know what he was doing. Only Shi Xiaotian knew that from today onwards, the Shi family would embark on the path of rebellion. Yu Qianzhou supported him and said sincerely, "The important matter is the most important." "Is there anything else the general wants to say to the family?" Shi Wenguang shook his head. "There's no time to lose, let's go." Yu Qianzhou nodded and shouted to a group of black-clothed masked men, "Team 1, spread out and hide around the general's residence. Before I return, kill anyone who enters or leaves the general's residence without mercy." The moment this order was given, the women immediately felt a little alarmed, not knowing what was going on. "Yes." The team of black-clothed masked men saluted and quickly shot out. "Team 2. Follow me." After giving the order, a flying sword flew out, and Yu Qianzhou directly carried the general and flew out. The remaining black-clothed men followed. The head of the family had left just like that, and a group of people who could fly suddenly appeared. The remaining people felt that something was wrong. Shi Xiaotian smiled and comforted them, "Everyone, don't worry. It's nothing. Father has urgent military affairs and has to rush back to deal with it." Bao Wanshi and Situ Hui looked at each other with complicated expressions. The army that had been stationed in the western suburbs of the capital for the past few days suddenly broke camp. The army set off, and Shi Wenguang ordered 3,000 cavalrymen to stay 1 li away from the army. 3,000 cavalrymen led the way, and the army of 10,000 rushed west overnight. Yu Qianzhou, on the other hand, sent a team to protect Shi Wenguang and gave a death order that Shi Wenguang must be safely sent back to the army camp at the western border. In Fuxian Island's myriad fragrance garden, a man and woman were burning dry firewood. Yu Qianzhou stayed in the general's residence for a day, and seeing that there was no movement from the imperial court, he reckoned that there was no big problem. However, he still carefully set up defenses in the general's residence before coming to Fuxian Island. After finding out the location of the new Excellence Assembly, Yu Qianzhou changed into Fuxian Island's clothes and swaggered over. However, when people walked towards him, he would still avoid them, and thus took many detours. Fortunately, he was still familiar with Fuxian Island, so he wouldn't get lost. He turned left and right until he reached the seaside, and he reckoned that he wouldn't meet anyone. Who knew that after walking a few steps, he would faintly hear someone calling out, "Yu Qianzhou," scaring him. He looked around but didn't see anyone. Then, he heard a voice that seemed to be coming from the other side of the rock. After listening carefully, it didn't seem like someone was calling him, but someone was talking about him. The voice was somewhat familiar. Thus, he sneakily climbed up the rock and stuck his head out to take a look. He was delighted when he saw who it was. It was none other than his old acquaintances, Ko Shuahua, Murong Xian, and Mei Yinhong from Myriad Fragrance Garden, Xiao Wanqing from Enron Pavilion, and Gu Qingyun from Cultivation Pavilion. Because these people were friends with Yu Qianqiu, they often came in contact with each other. After Yu Qianqiu was expelled from the sect, they would often gather together to reminisce about Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu's current position just happened to be downwind, so he could hear their conversation. After listening carefully, it turned out that the topic revolved around him. The concern in their words touched the eavesdroppers. TSK TSK. This brat Gu Qingyun's luck with women is not shallow. One person with 4 beauties, should I go out and meet them? Yu Qianqiu was somewhat hesitant, but in the end, he clenched his teeth and stood on the rock. Who is this? They are actually hiding here talking about love. A voice came, and the 5 people sitting on the beach were immediately startled. They abruptly stood up and looked back. A person on the rock was smiling at them, and they couldn't believe their eyes. Xiao Wanqing said in surprise, Yu Qianqiu, it's you. She covered her mouth with her hand and looked around carefully. Hee hee. Yu Qianqiu jumped down from the rock with a mischievous smile, and walked towards them. He said with a smile, everyone is in a good mood. You actually came here to talk about love. Gu Qingyun, aren't you a little too unscrupulous to enjoy the 4 beauties alone? Nonsense. Xiao Wanqing directly kicked his leg, but the joy on her face couldn't be concealed. Ko Shuahua looked around again and said worriedly, Yu Qianqiu, how dare you return to supporting Immortal Island? Beauty Ko, do you think there's a place in this world that I don't dare to go? Yu Qianqiu said arrogantly. The few of them smiled noncommittally. Murong Xian, who had always been a man of few words, suddenly exclaimed, Yu Qianqiu, how did you get in here? Could it be that even the supporting Immortal Island's protective formation couldn't stop you? Yu Qianqiu still replied arrogantly, Beauty Murong, do you think there's a place in this world that can stop me? He then waved at Mei Yinhong and said, Mimi, you've become much prettier. Gu Qingyun looked at his supporting Immortal Island uniform and couldn't help but laugh. Don't tell me you're still wearing supporting Immortal Island's uniform to swindle people outside? It made the women laugh again. Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes at him and said, Boy, don't forget what you said in the Devil's Domain. You said that as long as you can leave the Devil's Domain alive, you'll follow me. This time, I'm here to fulfill my promise. Gu Qingyun was stunned. He really did say something like that in the past. The women were also stunned. They thought to themselves, is he really here for this? These casual words made Yu Qianqiu think for a moment. Thus, he said with a meaningful smile, is there anyone else who wants to follow me? It's good to be with me. I guarantee that you'll be able to eat and drink well every day. They looked at each other. Xiao Wanqing asked timidly, Yu Qianqiu, will it be dangerous to follow you? I heard that the entire cultivation world is after you. Chapter 240. Danger? What danger? Don't you see that I'm alive and well? Yu Qianqiu smiled at them and said, do you want to leave with me? The few of them looked at each other, not knowing how to answer. It should be known that Yu Qianqiu was expelled from the sect. If they left now, they would be treated as traitors and it would be worse than being expelled from the sect. Although they have a good relationship with Yu Qianqiu, they wouldn't betray the sect for him because the consequences would be too severe. If supporting Immortal Island wanted to kill the traitors would have a miserable ending because supporting Immortal Island was too powerful. Ko Shuahua frowned and said, Yu Qianqiu, we can't leave with you. You should leave supporting Immortal Island quickly. Don't worry, we will pretend that we never saw you and won't tell anyone that you were here. The others nodded silently and expressed their agreement to Ko Shuahua's words. The atmosphere suddenly became heavy. Yu Qianqiu laughed and said, look at you guys. I was just casually saying it and you guys took it seriously. Why don't you think about it? It's hard for me to come in alone, how can I bring you guys out? Hearing this, the few of them heaved a sigh of relief. Xiao Wanqing said, Yu Qianqiu, don't joke about this in the future. It's making everyone feel awkward. Then why did you come to supporting Immortal Island this time? Gu Qingyun asked. Isn't there a new talent assembly today? I purposely came to take a look. Yu Qianzhou laughed and said. You are mistaken. Today is the day that all the sects are staying. The proper competition is tomorrow. Xiao Wanqing rushed to answer. Once the atmosphere was relaxed, she started to jump around again. So it's like that. Yu Qianzhou muttered to himself. Ko Shuahua sighed and said, It's not convenient for us to stay with you. You should leave as soon as possible. Once you are discovered, it will be hard for you to leave. Let's go. Gathering too many people here will only bring trouble to Yu Qianzhou. The last sentence was directed at the others. Ko Shuahua's cultivation was the highest among them. According to the seniority of the supporting Immortals Island, she was the teacher of the others. No one objected to what she said. Gu Qingyun patted Yu Qianzhou's shoulder and sighed, Then take care of yourself. Yu Qianzhou waved his hand at them and chuckled, It's fine, you guys can leave first. Just as he waved his hand, the 5 of them felt a wave of divine sense envelop them. Before they could react, the 5 of them on the beach felt their vision blur, and their surroundings changed. A man's heart is hard to fathom. Don't blame me. If you had agreed earlier, I wouldn't have had the heart to let you suffer the pain of having your natal primordial spirits forcibly removed. Sigh. Yu Qianzhou shook his head and sighed as he muttered to himself for a while. Then, he walked along the beach. The new Excellence Assembly was on the outer island of the supporting Immortals Island. The distance between the 2 islands wasn't far and there was a stone bridge connecting them. Even though it was only a small island, it was enough to welcome guests from all over. There were many courtyards built on the island. They were all prepared for such an event. Naturally, it was for the convenience of the various sections. Yu Qianzhou hid at a place not far from the bridge. When there were no more supporting Immortals Island disciples crossing, he swaggered over. Actually, this short distance of tens of meters could be crossed easily with his sword. However, he had stayed on the supporting Immortals Island before. He knew that this seemingly harmless distance might be hiding something strange. Many people were looking at the world's #1 supporting Immortals Island from the beach. They were all disciples of other sections. Yu Qianzhou walked through them openly. He could tell that most of them were Qi Refinement Realm disciples. As long as they weren't supporting Immortals Island disciples, they wouldn't be able to recognize him. Under the envious gazes of the various sects disciples, Yu Qianzhou wore the supporting Immortals Island's uniform and walked around with his head held high. Occasionally, there would be flying artifacts from other sects descending from the sky. Then, supporting Immortals Island disciples would immediately go over to arrange accommodations. After familiarizing himself with the surrounding terrain, the setting sun had already dyed the entire sea golden. Those who were supposed to come from the various sects had arrived. The supporting Immortals Island sent disciples to invite the various sect leaders and elders to welcome them. Naturally, the accompanying disciples wouldn't be able to participate in such an event. After watching the various sect leaders and elders leave for the supporting Immortals Island, Yu Qianzhou chuckled. He circulated his energy to force out his cultivation base. He knew that his body was unique. If he didn't want to display his cultivation base, others wouldn't be able to tell. However, he wanted to let others see it now. After making all the necessary preparations, he was about to execute his plan. He took out a jade archive and walked toward a sect's courtyard. Although the supporting Immortals Island was safe, the various sects still sent 1 or 2 people to guard the courtyard's entrance. Judging from their uniform, Yu Qianzhou didn't recognize them. They should be from a small sect. The 2 disciples guarding the entrance saw that he was wearing the supporting Immortals Island's uniform. Since they couldn't see through his cultivation base, they immediately bowed and said, "The disciples of the Rising Sun sect greet you, Senior. May I know what brings you here?" So they're from the Rising Sun sect. Yu Qianzhou didn't force his way in. He stopped and waved the jade archive in his hand. With a smile on his face, he said, "I've been ordered to verify the members of the various sections. I'll have to trouble Rising Sun sect's fellow sect members to cooperate with me." Please ask the disciples in the courtyard to come out for a moment. It won't take up too much of your time. His attitude was amiable and his words were courteous. The two disciples guarding the entrance could feel the demeanor of the world's #1 sect. One of the disciples guarding the entrance immediately bowed and said, "Senior, please wait for a moment. I'll first ask for instructions from the sect's elder who stayed behind." Yu Qianzhou raised his hand and gestured for the disciple to go ahead. He smiled and said, "It's all right. I'll just wait." The more courteous he was, the more the disciple dared not delay. He immediately ran into the house. Not long after, a group of people came out from the courtyard. There were at least 30 of them, and all of them gathered in the courtyard. They were probably the people who were preparing to participate in the competition. Finally, an old man walked out from the house. The old man glanced at Yu Qianzhou. Seeing that he was only in the middle stage of the core formation realm, he waved his hand and said, "Let him in." Yu Qianzhou couldn't see through the old man's cultivation base. Obviously, it was higher than his. He immediately bowed and said, "Disciple of the Pavilion of Cultivation, Gu Qingyun, greets Senior." The old man frowned and said, "Verify the members of the various sects. I've never seen supporting Xian Island having such a rule in the past years. Why is there such a rule this year?" Yu Qianzhou said respectfully, "It's just that the cultivation world isn't very peaceful these days. Our sect is worried that some small fries will take this opportunity to cause trouble. This is also for the safety of all sections. Please forgive us, Senior." His actions and tone gave the old man enough face. Yes. Supporting Xian Island is really thoughtful. The old man nodded and said, "Then hurry up. Senior, I want to ask again. Are all the disciples of the Rising Sun sect here? After I've registered them in the Jade Archive, I'll make a copy for the disciples guarding the sect. Don't miss any of them to avoid unnecessary trouble," Yu Qianzhou said. His words were reasonable. If not all the disciples were here, the guards of supporting Xian Island would find out that they had sent more people. At the very least, they would be interrogated. The old man immediately turned around and looked at the disciples who had gathered together. He nodded and said, "That's right. Except for the elders who attended the banquet, all the other disciples are here. Then I'll start now. Please forgive me, Senior." Yu Qianzhou pretended to pick up the Jade Archive in his hand. He opened his palm towards the crowd and released his divine sense to envelop everyone in the courtyard. When the old man felt the other party's divine sense enveloping him, he frowned. What was this? He immediately released his divine sense to block Yu Qianzhou's divine sense. However, when he thought about how he had already agreed to cooperate with Yu Qianzhou, he gave up resisting. Who knew that when he retracted his divine sense, the scene before his eyes would suddenly change? He didn't know where he was anymore. Looking at the empty courtyard, Yu Qianzhou sneered. He turned around and headed towards the next sect. There were more than 200 sects participating in the New Excellence Assembly every year. This was a chance for some of the smaller sects to obtain the foundation building pill. The reason why the Qi refining stage disciples were allowed to compete was to reflect fairness. At this time, the disciples of the various sects were still at the starting point. There was no situation where the smaller sects would suffer too much. Yu Qianzhou walked around the courtyards of the various sects, enthusiastically serving them. He was extremely busy. Bai Suzhen and Guan Yu, who were also in Utopia, were also extremely busy. People were constantly being sent into the formation that Bai Suzhen had set up. Guan Yu and his subordinates were dumbfounded. This leader was too amazing. They didn't know what she was doing. Looking at the clothes that the people were wearing, they were obviously disciples of the various sections. They really didn't know how the leader managed to do it. It was too unbelievable. After visiting more than 100 sects, they realized that the elders and managers of the various sects who attended the banquet were gradually returning. Yu Qianzhou immediately hid in a corner and quickly changed his clothes. He was already wearing the standard hero outfit. A small black flag was stuck in the courtyard with a ding sound. Then, he mounted his sword and flew towards the seaside. The elders and managers of the various sects, as well as the elders of supporting Immortals Island who escorted them, immediately noticed this uninvited guest. Dongfang Chung Ao, who was in the crowd, shouted, "Where are you from? How dare you trespass on my supporting Immortals Island? Where do you think you're going?" His figure flashed as he quickly chased after the intruder. Chapter 241. Immediately, a few people flew after him. The people from the other sects exchanged glances. The masked man in black had come out from the courtyards of their sections. Feeling that something was wrong, they immediately fled to their sect's residences. Dongfang Chung Ao and a few others caught up in the blink of an eye. Yu Qianqiu turned his hand and scattered a yellow light. Hundreds of astral breaching talismans flew towards the people chasing after him. The expressions of Dongfang Chung Ao and the others changed. They naturally knew what those talismans were. Although they couldn't hurt them, being hit by so many astral breaching talismans would definitely not feel good. "Hi!" Dongfang Chung Ao shouted. A long sword suddenly appeared in his hand. Immediately, he slashed several times in the air. The sharp sword light collided with the astral breaching talismans. Boom! A deafening explosion sounded. After the people behind him caught up, they also slashed several times at the smoke caused by the explosions of the astral breaching talismans. Then, without stopping, they went straight through the smoke. Yu Qianqiu turned around and was shocked to see the people who went through the smoke. He didn't expect that the powerful astral breaching talismans could not stop them at all. In the blink of an eye, they had caught up again. Immediately, a large number of fire talismans were scattered, followed by a handful of smoke talismans, and then another handful of astral breaching talismans. For a moment, the sky was filled with flames. Then, white smoke filled the air. Followed by angry shouts, there was a rumbling explosion. Suddenly, a clear whistle was heard. A figure wrapped in a layer of white astral energy passed through the explosion and the smoke. It was Dongfang Chung Ao. Looking at his angry face, it was obvious that he was furious. He didn't care about anything and didn't fear an ambush. He used his strong cultivation to break through the obstacles. It seemed that he wouldn't stop until he caught the masked man in black. So powerful. Yu Qianqiu was shocked. But when he thought of his plan, he gritted his teeth and jumped towards the sea below him. There was no way Dongfang Chung Ao would let him get away so easily. The flying sword in his hand turned into a white light and shot out like lightning. When Yu Qianqiu saw this, he was almost scared out of his wits. The flying sword under his feet hurriedly shot out and he rushed towards the sea. Just as his flying sword shot out, the other party's flying sword arrived. Clang! A crisp sound. Yu Qianqiu's flying sword, infused with mystic gold sand, was split into pieces by the opponent's sword. However, it wasn't completely useless. It blocked the attack of the opponent's sword. However, the fierce attack from the sword slammed into Yu Qianqiu's back. Yu Qianqiu coughed out a mouthful of blood. He had wanted to jump into the sea of the attack, but he was hit by the attack and he fell even faster into the sea. Before Yu Qianqiu fell into the sea, a jade archive fell from his body onto the beach. With a splash, Yu Qianqiu was submerged in the sea. Dongfang Chung Ao pointed with the sword in his hand. The flying sword leaped into the air and sped up. It fiercely shot towards the location where the man in black had fallen. Bang! The seawater was blasted high into the air. After that, the few people who followed behind also madly shot their flying swords into the sea. Several flying swords rose and fell, and the sea was immediately blasted into the sky. A large number of the fish in the sea immediately died and floated up to the surface. The few of them exchanged glances. Dongfang Chung Ao nodded. They immediately took the flying swords in their hands and rushed into the sea, disappearing without a trace. Looking at their expressions, it seemed as if they wanted to see the person alive and the corpse dead. That made sense. What kind of place was supporting Immortal Island? What's more, in front of so many people from the various sects, a few tribulation-passing stage elders couldn't catch a mid-stage core formation cultivator. If word got out, they would surely die of laughter. Hua hua. The few of them jumped out of the sea and floated in the air. White steam rose from their soaked clothes and evaporated them in an instant. They all shook their heads with puzzled expressions. Not only did they not find the man in black, but they didn't even find his corpse. They didn't even see a single piece of his corpse. Dongfang Cheng Ao looked at the sea below him with a gloomy expression. His gaze fell on the jade archive that the man in black dropped on the beach and paused for a moment. His figure floated down to the beach and he sucked the jade archive into his hand. After he examined it with his divine sense, his expression immediately changed. From the beginning to the end, only a few moments had passed. At this moment, several hundred people rushed over from supporting Immortals Island. It was obvious that they were alarmed by the commotion caused by the battle. As soon as the several hundred people arrived, a few dozen people quickly flew in the air and looked around. The rest of the people landed on the beach. The person in the lead was the Pavilion of Cultivation's principal elder. O Si Hai asked in a deep voice, Chang Ao, what exactly happened? Dongfang Cheng Ao immediately explained what happened. After listening, O Si Hai's expression twitched as he looked at the few people around him. He sneered and said, a few tribulation-passing stage elders couldn't even catch a core formation cultivator. What a joke. Elder O, don't be angry. Let me show you something. Dongfang Cheng Ao handed over the jade archive and frowned. This fell off the man's body when I knocked him into the sea. Humph. O Si Hai snorted. It was obvious that he wasn't satisfied with Dongfang Cheng Ao's performance. However, he still took the jade archive and examined it with his divine sense. After reading it, his expression also changed. He frowned and said, are you sure it fell off the man's body? I can't be wrong. Dongfang Cheng Ao shook his head. The people of supporting Xian Island looked at each other in surprise. They didn't know what the two of them were talking about. Could it be that there was some secret in the jade archive? While everyone was silent, a roar came from the residences of the various sects on the island. Everyone was shocked. O Si Hai shouted, leave a few people here to continue searching. The rest of you, follow me. Immediately, except for the few people who stayed behind, everyone else flew away. The residences of the various sects were in an uproar. Many people were shouting that the supporting Xian Island was up to no good. When O Si Hai led a few hundred people to descend from the sky, the group of people was immediately stunned. The lineup of Fuxian Island was too strong. However, there were still many people who demanded an explanation from the supporting Xian Island. Everyone, what exactly happened? O Si Hai cupped his hands at the crowd. Immediately, someone showed him a small black flag. O Si Hai took it and unfolded it. The word hero was embroidered on it in gold. O Si Hai frowned deeply. He suppressed the anger in his chest and saluted the crowd. What exactly happened? Therefore, more than 100 people from the various sects talked about the disappearance of their disciples. When the people of the supporting Immortal Island heard this, their expressions changed. If this was true, then this matter was going to be huge. There were more than 100 sects, and each sect had more than 30 people. In total, there were more than 3,000 people. To think that all of them had disappeared just like that. This was simply unimaginable. O Si Hai, who was holding the black flag, didn't rush to declare his position. Instead, he asked his people to disperse and follow the sects whose disciples had disappeared to check their residences. It didn't take long for the results to come out. It was just as the sects had said. Not only could they not find their residences, but they also couldn't find them on the entire island. They had disappeared into thin air. Moreover, there was no trace of a fight at the residences. It was really strange. Could they have run into the supporting Xian Island? This was impossible. There were always people watching this place. How could a few thousand people not see them? Everyone, please wait for a moment. I will immediately report this matter to the sect leader. I believe the sect leader will give everyone a satisfactory explanation. After O.C. Hai finished speaking, he didn't care whether the sects agreed or not. He turned around and shouted, "The rest of you stay and protect the sections. Chang Ao, follow me to see the sect leader." Two figures flew towards the Penglai pavilion. After Feng Xiangtian learned about what happened, he flew into a rage and smashed the table in front of him into pieces. He gritted his teeth and shouted in a low voice, "Hero, hero, who is this hero? How dare he offend Fuxian Island?" Chapter 242. He couldn't help but be angry. The new Excellence Assembly, which was held once every 10 years, was actually quite meaningless. How interesting could a competition between Qi refining disciples be? The distribution of Foundation establishment pills could be distributed according to each sect's contribution. The reason why supporting Immortal Island never got tired of this was that it could reflect their status in the cultivation world. But now, the number one sect in the world, supporting Immortal Island, was robbed right under their noses. Thousands of people didn't even know about it. Moreover, more than 100 sects were involved. How could supporting Immortal Island face the world if word of this got out? The most infuriating thing was that this hero was too arrogant. Not only did he touch the Deluo sect and Anquansung, but now he even dared to touch supporting Immortal Island. This was intolerable. Investigate. Investigate thoroughly. I don't believe this hero can hide in the heavens. Feng Xiangtian roared. O.C. Hai and Dongfang Chang Ao looked at each other. The former handed over a jade archive and said, "Sect leader, you should take a look at this first." Chang Ao struck this down from the masked man. Feng Xiangtian's eyes were about to burst into flames. He angrily took the jade archive and examined it with his divine sense. In the blink of an eye, his expression softened. He narrowed his eyes and looked at the two of them. No one else has seen this before, right? His tone had already returned to normal. If there was something in this jade archive that could change Feng Xiangtian's attitude so quickly, it had to be Yu Qianzhou's doing. Actually, there wasn't much inside. He almost lost his life and caused such a huge commotion. He just wanted to leave the jade archive given to him by the Temptress of 100 Charms to supporting Immortal Island. The map on it indicated a location not far from the 100 Flowers Valley. Although the commotion was huge and the three of them were furious, they completely calmed down when the 100 Flowers Valley was involved. The Palace Lord of the 100 Flowers Palace was the daughter of the previous sect leader of supporting Immortal Island. Besides O.C. Hai, the three of them were the direct disciples of the previous sect leader, Guan Dinghai. O.C. Hai was also a member of the Guan clan. Otherwise, he wouldn't have had the chance to manage the cultivation pavilion. Feng Xiangtian's position as sect leader was supported by Guan Dinghai with the Guan clan's influence on supporting Immortal Island. Since this matter involved Guan Dinghai, the three of them did not dare to show their anger. In fact, the three of them had some suspicions. Could it be that the hero, who caused such a commotion in the cultivation world, was created by Guan Dinghai's daughter? If it was true, then the three of them wouldn't dare to make the decision. Even Feng Xiangtian wouldn't dare to make the decision. Feng Xiangtian clutched the jade archive in his hand and muttered to himself, "The two of you, follow me to Heavenly Will Pavilion to meet Master." The three of them dashed out of the window. Feng TB Feng Feng, TTU. From to say, I said, Feng, in. After reading through the jade archive, how could he not know what the three of them were thinking? They were afraid that this matter would implicate his daughter, so they came to ask for his advice on what to do next. Guan Dinghai pondered for a long time. Suddenly, he chuckled coldly. Looking at the sect leader's disciples, he said in a deep voice, "You don't have to worry about this matter. Investigate. Investigate thoroughly. If she really did it, quickly tell me. I will personally execute this evil woman and pretend that I never had this daughter." The three of them glanced at each other, and then Feng Xiangtian frowned and said, "Master, I know senior sister well. If this matter is really related to the Flower Palace, then I don't believe senior sister would make a move against our supporting Immortal Island, and senior sister wouldn't make a move against our supporting Immortal Island. I'm more worried that it has something to do with that Yen fellow. Guan Dinghai glared at him and said, how many years has it been? You're still protecting her. Let me tell you, if this matter really has something to do with her, don't think about covering up for her. Quickly tell me. Feng Xiangtian showed an awkward expression. He bowed and said, don't worry, master. I know what I'm doing. O Sihai and Dongfang Chang Ao held back their laughter. They hadn't seen Feng Xiangtian's expression for many years. To be exact, they hadn't seen it since he became the sect leader. The two of them were insiders. Back then, Guan Dinghai really treated Feng Xiangtian like his own son. He had already intended to marry his daughter to Feng Xiangtian, and Feng Xiangtian liked it. Who knew that Yen Bugui of 10,000 demons would appear and capture Bai Hua Fairy's heart? Because of this, Feng Xiangtian was sad for a long time. With Guan Dinghai's words, the three of them returned. Feng Xiangtian handed the task of investigating this matter to Dongfang Chang Ao. After Yu Qianshou escaped back to Utopia, he didn't go anywhere else. Instead, he hid in Guan Yu's room. The bloodstains on his clothes and his pale face gave Guan Yu a fright. It was his first time seeing Yu Qianshou injured to this extent. Yu Qianshou was afraid that Bai Suzhen and the others would worry, so he told him to keep quiet and hide in Guan Yu's room to recuperate. Fortunately, he had the golden bead, so he didn't have to worry too much no matter how serious his injuries were. Half a day later, although his injuries weren't completely healed, they were mostly healed. When he could move freely again, he was about to leave. Guan Yu anxiously pulled him back, but in return, Feng Xiangtian warned him not to tell anyone about his injuries. He then quietly left. The next place he appeared was the place where he killed Lu Zhengguang and the others. Now, whenever he arrived at a new place, he would use his blood essence to mark the next location so that it would be convenient for him to return again. After determining the direction, he quickly flew toward the location marked on the jade archive given to him by the temptress. He found a valley deep in the forest. After confirming that the entrance to the cave that was concealed by a formation was not far away, he didn't approach it. Instead, he quickly found a convenient place to observe and hid. He continued to recuperate as he observed. Naturally, there was a reason why he had risked his injuries to do something like this. First of all, the fake hero was very powerful. He probably wouldn't be able to defeat him if he fought him head-on. If he was really hiding here, he wouldn't do as the temptress had said and compete to see who was more powerful. Since there was such a powerful opponent around, he might as well find an even more powerful opponent for them. Supporting Xian Island was the best choice. He believed that supporting Xian Island wouldn't let the matter rest after suffering such a huge loss. It would be best if he could get them to help him investigate the truth. It would be even better if he could use supporting Xian Island to destroy the fake hero. After another half a day, his injuries were more or less healed. Yu Qianshou, who was sitting cross-legged on a pile of dried branches and weeds, started to feel anxious. Why weren't the people from supporting Xian Island here yet? Could it be that they didn't notice the jade archive he had left behind? With the cultivation of Dongfang Chang Ao and the others, it was impossible for them not to notice it. Or was there another reason? Just as he was getting a little impatient, dozens of figures descended from the sky into the valley. Yu Qianshou held his breath and focused. His eyes lit up when he saw them. The one leading them was Dongfang Chang Ao. He counted them carefully. Oh my! They actually sent out 50 tribulation-passing elders from the Pavilion of Cultivation at once. This was going to be interesting. Chapter 243. Yu Qianshou's face revealed a proud expression. The fact that the hero was able to sneak into supporting Xian Island and commit murder without anyone noticing clearly attracted the attention of supporting Xian Island. Otherwise, they wouldn't have sent 50 tribulation-passing elders at once. If it were any other sect investigating this matter, they would definitely do it in secret. However, look at this hero. He didn't need to be sneaky. 50 people were openly here. It was obvious that they were prepared for a fight. Otherwise, they wouldn't have sent so many old fellows. Dongfang Chang Ao nodded at the crowd. Dozens of people immediately flashed in all directions and looked around. Yu Qianqiu quickly held his breath and hid among the weeds and withered trees like a hibernating animal. As expected, several divine senses swept past him. If it weren't for the mysterious effects of the golden pearl, he would have been discovered long ago. The group of people clearly didn't find anything suspicious. They gathered together again. Yu Qianqiu focused on their every move. Dongfang Chang Ao strolled to the front of a mountain wall that was overgrown with vegetation. He exclaimed softly, "Elder Gongsun, you're an expert in formations. Come and take a look. Are there any formations or mechanisms here?" He was at the place indicated on the Jade Archive. If it weren't for the mark on the archive, he wouldn't have believed that there was something hidden here. He couldn't tell the difference between this place and the rest of the valley. The old man who was called walked over. After carefully examining the surrounding terrain, he pressed his hand on the mountain wall. He plucked a white ivy flower and sniffed it. He frowned and asked, "Elder Dongfang, are you sure this is the place?" "Elder Gongsun, you mean?" Dongfang Chang Ao's expression darkened. "Could it be that we've been fooled? There's nothing here." The people of supporting Xian Island looked at each other. They had mobilized so many people to come here. Could it be that they had been fooled? Yu Qianqiu, who could vaguely hear their conversation, found it strange. Logically, it shouldn't be possible. There was no reason for the alluring beauty to give him a fake map. At this moment, one of the people in the group walked over with a sword in his hand and said, "Maybe there's something behind this mountain wall. Let me cut it open to take a look." "Wait." Elder Gongsun stared blankly at the mountain wall. He pushed his hand and said, "There is something strange about this mountain wall, look." Everyone looked in the direction of his finger and saw a white flower swaying in the wind on the green vine. But it was very ordinary. There were a lot of green vines and flowers in the valley. Everyone looked for a while but couldn't see anything. Seeing that no one understood, Elder Gongsun shook his head and said, "Watch carefully this time. I will pluck this flower, pay attention to the green vine's reaction." After saying that, he casually plucked the white flower. After hearing his words, everyone paid close attention to the green vines on the mountain wall. After waiting for a while, a white flower suddenly appeared on the entwined green vine. It was still at the position where it was plucked. This time, everyone clicked their tongues in wonder. Someone exclaimed, "Could it be that this green vine is some sort of natural spiritual treasure? Could it be that the Jade Archive is a treasure map?" "No, that's not right." Elder Gongsun shook his head, as if remembering something. Dongfang Chang Ao asked, "Elder Gongsun, what's not right?" Elder Gongsun regained his senses and sniffed the flower in his hand. He looked at the crowd and paused before saying, "It is rumored that in ancient times, there was a formation known as the North Pole Illusory Spirit Formation. The place where this formation was set up is extremely deceptive. It can absorb the spiritual energy of the heavens and earth and transform it into an illusion, merging with the surrounding scenery. No matter how high your cultivation base is, it will be difficult to discover the location of the formation. If I'm not wrong, someone must have laid down this formation. Fortunately, we have the map on the Jade Archive to guide us. Otherwise, no one would be able to tell that the scenery here is an illusion. But logically speaking, this formation should have been lost a long time ago. Why would it appear here? Looks like there's something special behind this mountain wall. Otherwise, who would set up a long-lost ancient formation here? Dongfang Chang Ao turned around and asked, "Elder Gongsun, do you have a way to break this formation? If it doesn't work, we'll just have to break it open by force. I'd like to see what kind of shameful things are hidden behind it." Elder Gongsun shook his head and smiled. For this formation to be famous in ancient times, it naturally has its own unique features. Although it doesn't possess any offensive capabilities, it is a top-notch defensive formation. Once the North Pole illusory spirit formation is set up, it can merge with the spiritual energy of the heavens and earth, allowing it to grow and multiply endlessly. Just like the flower I plucked earlier, it will grow back after you pluck it. Similarly, once you break it open, it will immediately return to its original state. Furthermore, the more powerful the attack, the faster it will recover. Unless there's no longer enough spiritual energy in the world to support its operation, or the person who set up the formation decided to remove it. Gongsun, what kind of joke is this? How can the spiritual energy of the heavens and earth be cut off? It's even more impossible for the person who set up the formation to remove it. Do you think we're guests? Do you think they'll open the door to welcome us? The person who said he wanted to break open the formation said angrily. If this formation is so powerful, then wouldn't we have come here for nothing? Another person said. Elder Gongsun, do you have a way to break this formation? Dongfang Cheng Ao saw the confident smile on his face and couldn't help but ask. This formation may be able to stop others, but it can't stop me. Elder Gongsun smiled a little proudly. Years ago, I accidentally came up with a useless formation. Because it wasn't very useful, I never really used it. I didn't think I'd be able to use it today. As soon as he said this, someone asked curiously, formation? What formation can break this ancient formation? My formation can't trap people, nor can it stop people, nor can it hurt people. But once it's set up, it can drain all the spiritual energy in the formation and cut off the spiritual energy from the outside. If you set up my formation outside the North Pole illusion spirit formation, what do you think will happen? After Elder Gongsun said this proudly, everyone immediately understood what he meant. Someone laughed, amazing. This is too amazing. Gongsun, you're really something. You actually came up with such a formation. Dongfang Cheng Ao couldn't help but smile. It seemed like it was a coincidence that he was dragged here today. So, he raised his hand. Elder Gongsun, I'll leave this to you. Do you need any help? No need, just watch the show. Elder Gongsun waved his hand at everyone. After looking around, he started to take things out from his storage bag. As his body flashed, he started to get busy in a radius of 10 meters with the mountain wall as the center. Yu Qianqiu, who was hiding not far away, heard everything and sighed. Supporting Xian Island definitely didn't get it by luck. They really had all kinds of talents. This was heaven's will. Fortunately, the supporting Immortal Island was involved. Otherwise, no one would be able to break this formation. Not long after, Elder Gongsun finished setting up the formation. After everyone retreated 10 meters away, he formed a hand seal and shot a white light into the formation. He shouted, "Activate." There was a fluctuation in the formation, and there was a hissing sound. Spiritual energy condensed into a white mist in front of the mountain wall, slowly spreading in all directions. Everyone nodded. The formation that Elder Gongsun set up was obviously working. The vines and flowers in front of the mountain wall started to lose their original luster, and their colors gradually dimmed. Under Gongsun's control, the formation spun faster and faster, and the speed at which spiritual energy was extracted also increased. A few hours later, the scene in the formation started to shake, and a faintly discernible cave in front of the mountain wall appeared before everyone's eyes. The group exchanged glances, thinking that there was indeed a mystery in there. Dongfang Cheng Ao waved his hand solemnly, and everyone went on high alert. Chapter 244. After the spiritual energy in the array was sucked dry, a 3-meter-wide hole appeared before everyone's eyes. Immediately, 2 people dashed into the hole and observed it. Then, they nodded to everyone. The group of old fellows carefully went in, leaving the remaining people to guard the hole. Damn it! Yu Qianqiu cursed in his heart. If they all went in, he could sneak in behind them to see what kind of place it was. Who knew that not long after, the sounds of fighting could be heard coming from inside? Then, Dongfang Cheng Ao shouted, "How dare you, evildoer!" The expressions of the people outside the hole changed. They nodded at each other and dashed in. The sounds of fighting became more intense. Even Yu Qianqiu, who was hiding in the mountain opposite, could feel the ground shaking. "Evildoer?" Yu Qianqiu mumbled to himself. He pulled down the black mask on his head, revealing only his eyes. Just as he was about to sneak in to watch the show, he was suddenly attracted by a place. From his point of view, the scene at the corner of the valley suddenly fluctuated, and another cave entrance suddenly appeared on the mountain wall. Two old men in white scuttled out and looked around. Then, they nodded at the hole. Then, one of them dashed out and said something to the two old men before flying away. "It's really you." Yu Qianqiu sneered to himself. The person who flew away was none other than Hundred Flowers Palace's Yan Juexing. He was also heading in the direction of the Hundred Flowers Valley. After the hole that appeared suddenly returned to its original state, the two old men in white flashed to the hole that the people from supporting Immortals Island had entered. They stood guard in front of the hole and took out a shiny silver chain from their storage bags, holding it horizontally in their hands. Upon closer inspection, one could see that the two ends of the chain seemed to be tied with two sharp claws. Yu Qianqiu secretly pondered about their origins. Judging from their clothes and weapons, he had not seen or heard of them in the cultivation world. Listening to the sounds of fierce fighting in the cave and the occasional blood-curdling screams, he didn't know which side had won. However, the people in the cave were not to be trifled with. Otherwise, they would not have been able to fight against the 50 crossing calamity stage experts from the supporting Immortal Island for such a long time. The people from Fuxian Island probably weren't feeling any better. From Dongfang Cheng Ao's angry roars, it was obvious that he was like a wounded lion. Yu Qianqiu shook his head inwardly. This Fuxian Island must have been too arrogant in the cultivation world. They dared to barge into other people's lair without any backup. They didn't even consider that those fellows who could annihilate An Kwangsung were not easy to deal with. They deserved to learn from their mistakes. The sounds of fighting became clearer and clearer as it approached the entrance of the cave. As soon as the elders of the supporting Immortal Island shot out, they were greeted by two sharp claws that swept across the sky. The silver dragon brandished its claws, the light and shadow were cold, stirring up the entire valley with echoes of hua hua. After a few violent sounds of metal clashing, the few people who were just about to rush out were forced back. It's over. Supporting Immortal Island had suffered a great loss this time. They closed the door to beat the dog and attacked from both sides. Yu Qianqiu clearly saw that the few people who had just shot out of the cave were already injured. "Hi!" A shout came from the cave, and suddenly, a dazzling golden light shot out from the cave entrance. Bang! With a loud sound, the cave entrance suddenly collapsed. Yu Qianqiu, who was hiding on the other side of the mountain, was speechless. Oh my! What is this? It actually caused half of the mountain to collapse? Immediately after, a golden light shot out from the collapsed area, causing the earth to collapse and rocks to fly. A figure dashed out from the collapsed area, and it was Dongfang Cheng Ao. The two white-robed elders outside immediately pounced over, and the two silver dragon claws clawed out from the left and right. At this moment, Dongfang Cheng Ao was not holding a sword in his hand, but a golden spear. With a shake of his hand, the golden spear's spearhead suddenly enlarged by 1,000 times. The spearhead was the size of half a door, and it swept towards the incoming chain claws with a dazzling golden light. Ding dang! The two silver dragons were cut into pieces by the sharp golden light. High-grade offensive magic treasure. The two of them exclaimed at the same time. However, this was only the first spear, and Dongfang Cheng Ao's second spear swept over. Go! As one of them shouted, he quickly dodged. Without a weapon, how could he block the attack of a high-grade magic treasure with his bare hands? The other person's reaction seemed to be a little slower, and he was hit by the spear's golden light. Ah! Accompanied by a scream, the person was split into two and fell down. Dongfang Cheng Ao brandished his spear like a god of death. He stood in the air and glanced at the hole he opened. As soon as more than 10 of his fellow sect members flew out, a silver chain claw flew out from the hole and grabbed towards the last person who flew out. Dongfang Chang Ao swung the golden spear in his hand, and blocked the flying claw for his fellow sect member. The chain claw wrapped around the spear's handle where the spear's head connected. He raised the spear, and the owner of the chain claw flew out from the hole together with the chain. Who? The golden light whistled and attacked. When that person saw the situation clearly, he was almost scared out of his wits. He immediately let go of the chain and wanted to escape, but he was still too late. The golden light flashed, and the broken chain claw sprinkled a rain of blood. Quickly return to the sect, you guys go first. I will cover you. Dongfang Chang Ao shouted with grief and indignation. Out of the 50 people that came out, only a dozen or so were left. How could he not feel sad? The remaining people from Fuxian Island did not say anything and immediately ran away. He was the only one left to guard the hole with his spear. Almost every spear attack did not miss, and he killed everyone that came out. The eyes of the white-robed elder who survived the spear turned red, but he did not dare to underestimate the sharpness of the high-grade magic treasure. Good treasure. Good treasure. Yu Qianshou's eyes lit up, and he stared at the golden spear in Dongfang Chang Ao's hand. The people under the hole seemed to know that it was too difficult to charge out, so no one came out. Dongfang Chang Ao was still guarding there. Yu Qianshou secretly felt something was wrong, and he looked at the hole that Yan Juixing came out from. Sure enough, the hole was already wide open. Swoosh swoosh. Dozens of people in white flew out, and immediately surrounded Dongfang Chang Ao. The latter was shocked. He did not expect there to be a back door in this cave. He was not a rigid person, so he moved, and with a few spear attacks, he broke through the encirclement, and flew away quickly. A group of people chased after him. Seeing that Dongfang Chang Ao was flying in the direction of the Hundred Flowers Valley, Yu Qianshou thought that if he could escape to the Hundred Flowers Valley, it would be a way to save his life. Yan Juixing always did things sneakily, and he reckoned that this group of people would not dare to break into the Hundred Flowers Valley. Moreover, there was the Cultivation Alliance there. The valley immediately became empty. Yu Qianshou looked at the open hole, and he wanted to run in to see, but he did not know if there was anyone inside. Then, he thought that those people would definitely come back, regardless of whether they could chase Dongfang Chang Ao or not. So, he gave up the idea of taking the risk. He thought to himself, supporting Xian Island has lost more than 30 tribulation stage elders this time, and I don't know what will happen next. I'd better continue to watch the show. I just need to help at the critical moment. Yu Qianshou glanced at the corpses in the valley, and he suddenly froze on the spot. When he came to his senses, he rubbed his eyes, and hurriedly jumped to the place where the battle took place. He saw that the people in white killed by Dongfang Chang Ao were all gone, and there were animal corpses on the ground. To be exact, they should be the corpses of white foxes. This immediately made him think of something. Chapter 245. Little Snow's 4 treasures belonged to the Fox clan, and Yan Juixing had auctioned them off. There had to be a connection between the two. Were the corpses of the Snow Fox clan in the extreme north? Yu Qianshou thought about it again and again, but he still pulled Bai Suzhen out to verify it. Seeing the corpses of her clansmen on the ground, Bai Suzhen's face flashed a trace of desolation. Yu Qianshou understood from her expression and didn't ask any more. He casually flicked out a dozen fireballs and instantly turned the corpses of the Fox clan into ashes. After Yu Qianshou roughly explained what had happened, Bai Suzhen didn't say anything else and hurriedly entered the cave. Yu Qianshou had no choice but to follow her in. After going deeper, he realized that this was a spirit stone mine that had been abandoned for many years. It was a pity that he didn't see a single living person. In a large mine, the corpses of the supporting Immortal Island and the Fox clan were all over the ground. Bai Suzhen looked around and actually found a dying Fox clan member. Seeing Bai Sujin supporting the elder and using her demonic essence to save him, Yu Qianqiu sighed and said, "We can't stay here for long. Let's go back first." When the three of them reappeared, they were already in the earliest bamboo house of Utopia. This was their earliest residence, and there was also House Sansi's tomb in the backyard. Therefore, this place had become one of the forbidden areas of Utopia. After helping her carry the Fox clan elder to a bamboo bed, Yu Qianqiu couldn't bear to see her anxious look. He took out a rainbow-colored Rui pill and said, "Use this. I believe that as long as he's still breathing, he can be saved." Bai Sujin was stunned. She knew how precious the Rui pill was. After hesitating for a moment, she still took it and turned around to help the dying elder consume it. After doing what needed to be done, she could only leave it to fate. If even the Rui pill that could bring the dead back to life couldn't save him, then there was nothing she could do. Seeing her staring at the old man on the bamboo bed in a daze, Yu Qianqiu walked to her side and comforted her. "Sister, don't worry. He'll be fine. Do you know him?" "He's my uncle." Bai Sujin stuttered. "Heir." Yu Qianqiu was completely speechless. Thus, the two of them didn't do anything and just quietly guarded the bamboo house. However, the effects of the Rui pill, refined from the adumbra flower, were truly excellent. A demon that was on the verge of death slowly regained consciousness in less than a day. When he opened his eyes, he saw Bai Sujin guarding the bedside with a concerned expression. He exclaimed in surprise, "Ling, aren't you dead?" Yu Qianqiu knew that Ling was Bai Sujin's nickname in the past. "Uncle, it's me." Bai Sujin smiled sweetly. "Where is this?" The man looked around. When he saw Bai Sujin's attire, he exclaimed in surprise again, "Little Snow's 4 treasures? Why are they on you?" Bai Sujin shook her head and didn't answer. Instead, she frowned and asked, "Uncle, why aren't you staying in the clan? Why did you come to the Huaxia Empire?" "It's all because your mother forced us to." The man laughed bitterly and touched the wound on his abdomen that was about to heal. He said blankly, "You saved me?" "Not me, he saved you." Bai Sujin pointed at Yu Qianqiu and said. The man sized up Yu Qianqiu and struggled to get up to thank him. Yu Qianqiu hurriedly pressed him down and said with a smile, "It's nothing. There's no need to be so polite. Just focus on recovering." "He's your man?" The man was puzzled. Bai Sujin and Yu Qianqiu looked at each other. Bai Sujin smiled noncommittally, then frowned and said, "Uncle, you said my mother forced you. What's going on?" The man shook his head with a bitter smile and told them what had happened. It turned out that Bai Sujin's mother, Xue Qingmei, had been forced to step down from the position of clan leader for the sake of her daughter. She had never been reconciled to it, and just 100 years ago, she, who had been accumulating power, had taken back the position of clan leader from the hands of a man. She had then gone on a killing spree within the clan, forcing the male clan leader who had ascended to the position from her hands to lead his people and flee. In the end, they fled to the Huaxia Empire. His name was Xue Qingkong. He was also one of the patriarch's subordinates. Naturally, he also fled to the Huaxia Empire. Yu Qianqiu looked at Bai Sujin in shock after hearing about the female patriarch's ruthless methods. He thought to himself, "Your mother is not as gentle as you say." But thinking about it, a mother might show a positive side to her daughter, but how many daughters would say bad things about their mother? "Senior, how did you get together with Yan Zhuixing of the 100 Flowers Palace? Why did he auction the 4 treasures?" Yu Qianqiu asked. "When we came, Yan Zhuixing wasn't even born yet. If there's one, it's with his father, Yan Bugui." Xue Qingkong smiled bitterly and began to tell them what happened after that. The male patriarch of the Fox tribe had originally brought 600 to 700 people with him to escape. But who knew that Bai Sujin's mother was so cruel and merciless? She wanted to eliminate the root of the problem and sent people to chase after them. The number of people who had been running for their lives had decreased from 6 to 700 to 3 to 400. Only when they had escaped into the territory of another empire did the Fox clan, who had been chasing after them, receive an attack from the local cultivators, allowing the remaining people to survive. But they didn't dare to stay in that empire, so they secretly sneaked into the Huaxia Empire. After hiding in the Huaxia Empire, they wanted to go back and take revenge, but they weren't Xue Qingmei's match. They wanted to expand their forces there, but the human cultivators were very against the Yao race. If they weren't careful, they might bring disaster upon themselves. Just when everyone was feeling disheartened, Yan Bugui, who had married Bai Hua Fairy, appeared. It turned out that Yan Bugui had accidentally obtained a demon-revealing mirror made by a divine craftsman. When he met them, he found out that they were actually a group of fox demons. Unlike the others, Yan Bugui didn't reject the Yao race. He even befriended them and helped them as much as he could. When Yan Bugui found out about their origins, as well as that they knew the long-lost primordial spirit stripping technique, he immediately came up with a perfect revenge plan for them. That was to control the human cultivators and gather enough power to return to the extreme north for revenge. Hearing Xue Qingkong's explanation, Yu Qianqiu doubtfully asked, "Is Yan Bugui really that kind?" "That's right. Back then, we were blinded by our hatred. By the time we realized it, it was already too late," Xue Qingkong sighed. "After realizing that he was using us, we immediately wanted to turn against him, but we didn't know that he had already poisoned us with the 10,000 demons bone-adhering poison. Once it was activated, we felt like we were better off dead than alive. From then on, we had to take the antidote once a month. If anyone dared to disobey his orders, the patriarch died from this poison. The scene of his death was too horrible to even look at. All his bones were melted away by the poison, leaving him lying on the ground like a pile of mud. We watched as he slowly died of exhaustion." The two of them looked at each other. They knew that the patriarch he was talking about was the male patriarch who had led them to this place. They didn't expect that he was already dead. Seeing that he still looked fearful, Bai Suzhen frowned and said, "Uncle, you don't have to worry. I gave you the Rui pill refined from the Adumbra flower to heal your wounds. The poison in your body should be neutralized by now." "The Adumbra flower?" Xue Qingkong cried out in surprise. She immediately circulated her energy to check her body. Sure enough, the poison in her bones was gone. She smiled in pleasant surprise. Bai Suzhen turned to Yu Qianqiu and asked, "The pill recipe Jade Archive seems to contain the antidote that can completely neutralize the bone-adhering poison, right?" "That's right. However, we're still missing a spiritual herb as the main ingredient. However, the Jade Archive says that it should grow in the demon domain." Yu Qianqiu knew that she wanted to help her clansmen neutralize the bone-adhering poison. However, the Adumbra flower was too precious. It would be a waste to use it just to neutralize the poison. Not to mention, not all of those people were her uncle. He rubbed his nose and smiled, "Sister, don't worry. Leave the matter of neutralizing the poison and your clansmen to me. I'll make a trip to the demon domain someday and ask the Ghost General to help me look for it." Bai Suzhen nodded. Words of gratitude were no longer necessary between the two of them. However, Yu Qianqiu suddenly thought of something frightening. He couldn't help but frown. "Senior Xue, you mean to say that 100 years ago, you started using the great art of extracting primordial spirit on Yan Bugui? Doesn't that mean that he has been secretly accumulating his strength for 100 years? Chapter 246. Xue Qingkong was still immersed in the excitement of getting rid of the poison and didn't hear what he said. Bai Suzhen pulled him and repeated Yu Qianqiu's words. Xue Qingkong nodded gratefully and said, "It's been 150 years, and I've recruited a lot of people. I'm afraid there are more than 10,000 of them now. The weakest is at the nascent soul stage, and there are more than 200 who are at the tribulation stage. Yan Bugui's strength shouldn't be weak." "What do you mean by shouldn't be weak?" Yu Qianqiu exclaimed and couldn't help but roll his eyes at him. "Yan Bugui's strength is almost on par with Fuxian Island, and you call that not weak? If I have such strength, I can do whatever I want in the cultivation world. Why does he have so many tribulation stage cultivators?" Yu Qianqiu asked, "How many of them are at the final stage of the tribulation stage?" "We secretly helped him catch them, and after we caught them, we removed the control of their yuanshen. Most of them are rogue cultivators. Some of them were at the final stage of the nascent soul stage when they were caught, but after so many years of cultivation, they have also reached the tribulation stage. There are 4 of them at the final stage of the tribulation stage, Xue Qingkong explained. Are you included in the 200 tribulation stage cultivators? Yes, we are more than half of them, and the 4 of them are also our people. Hearing this, Yu Qianzhou's eyes lit up and he quickly calculated in his mind. If this group of Fox clan members who were controlled by Yan Bugui's poison were suddenly detoxified, how would they react? It seemed that he had to go to the realm of monsters as soon as possible. Although he had a plan, he still had some questions in his mind, so he frowned and asked, "Where are Yan Bugui's people? Why did Yan Zhuixing sell the 5 treasures made by the divine craftsman?" Xue Qingkong felt relaxed after getting rid of the poison that had possessed him for 100 years. He was very grateful to Yu Qianzhou, so he answered immediately, "Except for those who are used frequently, the rest are hidden on an island in the sea. As for why they are selling 5 treasures, I don't know. But judging from a few things, he was afraid that he didn't have enough spirit stones. Originally, we would capture anyone who had stepped into the core formation stage, but we stopped doing so 50 years ago. Normally, we wouldn't touch anyone below the nascent soul stage, but now, we won't capture anyone below the late nascent soul stage." Once, I heard Yan Zhuixing sigh. He said that the cost of 10,000 people wasn't a small number. Not long after that, he sold the 5 treasures made by the divine craftsman. And this time, they mobilized more than 400 people from overseas to attack Anquangsung. Among them, they used 100 cultivators who were in the tribulation transcending stage, mainly to rush for spirit stones. They robbed Anquangsung of more than 100 million high-grade spirit stones. Bastard! Yu Qianzhou cursed under his breath. He thought, "I worked so hard to loot 21 spirit stone mines, but I only got 10 million high-grade spirit stones." In the end, Anquangsung's strength was split, and the 100-flower palace benefited from it. Damn it! Yu Qianzhou frowned. "If I ask you to take me to the island, can you find the way?" "Yes," Xue Qingkong said without hesitation. Bai Suzhen frowned, but she didn't say anything. He is so powerful, but he still has to endure. It seems that Yan Bugui's ambition is to conquer the entire cultivation world. Good. Rest well, I won't disturb you anymore. Yu Qianzhou nodded with satisfaction, then said to Bai Suzhen, "Sister, I have something to do. You two take your time." With that, he disappeared. Xue Qingkong was taken aback and exclaimed, "Ling, He is also at the last phase of the tribulation passing stage?" Bai Suzhen's frown didn't loosen. Instead, she asked, "Uncle, if I wanted your natal primordial spirit, would you agree?" "What do you mean?" Xue Qingkong was shocked. Bai Suzhen's figure flickered like a phantom, and her fingers formed into a claw as she grabbed onto his head. A white light wrapped around his head, and when she retracted her hand, a small person that looked like Xue Qingkong, who was only a few inches tall, was caught. Bai Suzhen put the natal yuanshen into a spirit stone and put it in her storage pouch. She looked at Xue Qingkong who was crying on the bed and sighed, "Uncle, don't blame me." Since he said that, he must have planned to go overseas. "I can stop him, but I won't. Uncle, do you know? His place in my heart is no lighter than my mother's. He is the most important person in my life. I will not allow anyone to bring danger to him. Don't worry, Uncle. When I think he is safe, I will return your natal yuanshen to you." Although her words were sincere, Xue Qingkong was currently suffering from soul-deep pain. Coupled with the injuries on her body, how could she hear what she was saying? Yu Qianzhou didn't go anywhere else, but went to the ethereal palace to find Xu Ping. When the attack on Anquangsung was mentioned, he remembered that he promised Xu Ping to bring her master here. Now that Anquangsung was gone, who knew if her master was still alive or not? As the saying goes, it's better to get the pain over with as soon as possible. At most, it would be over with time. At that time, little Wu Chou was playing with Chu Ping, and the little guy seemed to like this beautiful sister-in-law very much. When Yu Qianqiu drove him out, he was quite reluctant. This caused Chu Pinger's face to turn red. Who asked Yu Qianqiu to rarely see people? Even if he did, he would pester her to do that kind of thing the moment he came. She could not help but misunderstand Yu Qianqiu's current actions. When Yu Qianqiu told her the bad news that An Kuangsung was killed, Chu Ping was stunned as if she was struck by lightning. Yu Qianqiu didn't comfort her, but turned around and left. Now was the time for her to vent her anger, and no one could persuade her. After walking out of the ethereal palace with a heavy heart, he stood at the top of the mountain and saw a couple holding hands on the mountainside. It was his parents who were climbing the mountain. A gratified smile appeared on his face. It was his long-cherished wish to let his wife and family live a happy life. Looking into the distance, he could see a circle of purple in the sky, but after he broke through to the middle stage of the core formation realm, he couldn't see it anymore. Yu Qianqiu let out a breath and murmured, "Ping, An Kuangsung's death might be hard for you to accept, but it's not necessarily a bad thing for me. Maybe I'm too selfish, but I really don't want you to live in the shadows of An Kuangsung and your master for the rest of your life. You're my woman, not anyone's disciple." When Yu Changgui and his wife reached the top of the mountain, Yu Qianqiu told them about Master Chu Ping's misfortune. He begged his parents to comfort her after she calmed down, and he told Bai Suzhen through his divine sense. After making arrangements for Chu Ping, he went to the border of Utopia and took out the green destiny sword. It was also a high-grade offensive magic treasure. The image of Dongfang Chang Ao being invincible with the spear in his hand was still vivid in his mind. Outside the Hundred Flowers Valley, Yu Qianqiu walked in openly with the Hundred Flowers Valley's access token. As he expected, although his arrival caused quite a commotion in the Hundred Flowers Valley, it was nothing much. An Kuangsung had been killed, and no one was offering a bounty for his capture anymore. He believed that those itinerant cultivators wouldn't find trouble with him for no reason. The supporting Immortal Island hadn't even solved their own problems, so they wouldn't care about him. The righteous and demonic sects were in a cold war, and no one would act rashly. As for the ones who dared to touch him, it was probably the Daluo sect. However, they still had to give the Hundred Flowers Valley some face, so they wouldn't touch him here. So what if they did touch him? Since he dared to appear openly, he wasn't afraid of the Daluo sect. What he was afraid of was that the Daluo sect wouldn't find trouble with him. From today onwards, he didn't need to be sneaky anymore. Otherwise, once the troubles of the various sects were solved, he would have to hide for the rest of his life. This was the time to make a name for himself. Only by making those who wanted to deal with him fear him could he live openly in the future. Walking on the streets of the Hundred Flowers Valley, Yu Qianqiu let out a depressed breath. The Daluo sect hopes that you can come quickly. I, Yu Qianqiu, need to ignite my anger. I need to ignite your Daluo sect to achieve my glory. Chapter 247. He wore a fitting black robe, carried a long sword on his back, and had a storage bag on his waist. This was the standard attire of a cultivator. It was the first time that he had appeared in a public place outside of supporting Immortals Island. He was walking on the streets of the Hundred Flowers Valley. Yu Qianqiu is here. Someone recognized him, and the news spread quickly. Many people came to see what was going on. On both sides of the street, countless people looked at this guy who looked like he was taking a leisurely stroll. Everyone was amazed. They said that he was extremely daring, offended the Daluo sect, and dared to show his face without the protection of supporting Immortals Island. Yu Qianqiu glanced at both sides of the street, and there were many familiar faces. There were also many people in the Cultivation Alliance who were familiar with him, but they didn't know whether to greet him or not. Especially the people from supporting Immortals Island, who were disciples of the same sect as him. Everyone had the opportunity to stay in the cultivation pavilion after going through many hardships and competitions. Why were they acting like strangers when they met again? Xionghui had some friendship with Yu Qianqiu, but he didn't know whether to greet him or not under the watchful eyes of the crowd. Yu Qianqiu glanced at him and smiled at him. Xiong Hui smiled bitterly and shook his head. Dong Guosu, who was setting up a stall, was shocked when he heard that Yu Qianqiu was here. He threw his stall aside and hurried over. He saw Yu Qianqiu, and Yu Qianqiu also saw him. However, Yu Qianqiu looked away as if he didn't know him. The people from the 4 major families were also shocked when they heard that Yu Qianqiu was here. The 4 major families were looking for him everywhere. After confirming that it was him, the communication formations in the 4 shops were activated, and the news of Yu Qianqiu's appearance was sent back. Waha! Brother Yu, you finally showed up. Xiao Wuyuan laughed as he walked over from the other end of the street. As he walked, he pointed at a group of people behind him and said, "Old brother, I'm here to welcome you with my fellows from the Devil Dao." The group of people behind him also laughed happily. As soon as he said that, the expressions of the righteous path's people changed, especially the people from supporting Immortal Island. If the outstanding disciple of the number 1 sect of the righteous path joined the devil path, then supporting Immortal Island would really be criticized behind their backs. After meeting up with Qiu Wuyuan and the rest, Yu Qianqiu cupped his fists and smiled. You flatter me, you flatter me. The people of the demonic path were like stars surrounding the moon. They surrounded him in the center, talking to him one after another. He naturally responded, as if they were old friends meeting. Brother Yu. Someone shouted from afar. Everyone looked over and saw a few people following behind Yan Zhuixing, walking over quickly. Yu Qianqiu walked out of the crowd and cupped his fists from afar. Brother Yan, long time no see. The 2 of them walked over and hugged each other passionately, as if their relationship was very close. The performance here was not over yet. 4 people came out from the side of the street and bowed to Yu Qianqiu together, by clan, Jing clan, Tan clan, and Wu clan, under the orders of the clan heads, respectfully invite Mr. Yu to visit the 4 major clans. Saying that, the 4 of them took out their invitations. Yu Qianqiu understood the meaning of the 4 major clans. They knew that he was here and were afraid that something bad would happen to him. So, they purposely came to suppress him in front of everyone. He smiled and received the invitations. He cupped his fists and said, "Send my regards to the 4 clan heads. I will definitely visit them in the future." The 4 of them acknowledged and left. The people in the surroundings couldn't stop clicking their tongues. This Yu Qianqiu might have been expelled from supporting Immortal Island, but he was still doing very well. The supporting Immortal Island's disciples in the crowd had an indescribable feeling. Some of them had already left quietly to report what happened here to Quan Deming. Qiu Wuyuan twirled his beard and smiled. This brat's connections were quite wide. He even managed to hook up with the clan heads of the 4 major clans. If he could pull this brat into the 10,000 demons, it would only be beneficial for the 10,000 demons. Not only him, but the various demonic sects and Yan Zhuixing also had the same thought. Hee. Brother Yu, you didn't give me face when I invited you for a drink last time. This time, don't reject me again. Qiu Wuyuan chuckled. He was referring to the time when Yu Qianqiu hadn't been expelled from supporting Immortal Island. At that time, he was concerned about the feud between the righteous and demonic sects, so he didn't force Yu Qianqiu. Naturally, he didn't have to worry about that this time. I'll do as you say. Yu Qianqiu cupped his fists and said. The people in the surroundings were pondering. They reckoned that it was only a matter of time before Yu Qianqiu joined the demonic sections. Senior Qiu, that's not right. Yan Zhuixing suddenly interrupted. How can we let Senior Qiu treat us in our 100 Flowers Palace's territory? Today, I'll be the host at 100 Flowers Palace to welcome Brother Yu. Why don't you all come and drink with us? Once he said that, the demonic sects cheered. Qiu Wuyuan smiled and didn't say anything. If it was someone else, he would probably retort. However, Yan Zhuixing was different. He was the son of his senior brother Yan Bugue. Yu Qianqiu looked at Yan Zhuixing with a smile. However, he was muttering in his heart, damn it. You're so poor that you have to rob others. Why are you still pretending to be generous? Just as the bustling crowd was rushing towards Hundred Flowers Palace, another group of people walked over. When Yu Qianqiu saw them, he was instantly amused. It was another old acquaintance. However, this old acquaintance wouldn't treat him to a drink. It was Luo Xiaohan, who he had fought at Limu House on Hat Island. At this moment, he was leading a group of Daluo sect disciples over with a sinister smile. Everyone knew why Luo Xiaohan was here. The demonic sects always worshipped the strong. Everyone had the mentality of watching a show. They wanted to see how Yu Qianqiu would deal with it. They wanted to see if he lived up to his reputation. Yu Qianqiu suddenly sighed to Yan Juexing, who was beside him. Brother Yan, it would be great if all the spoiled brats in the cultivation world were as smart as you. However, they are all reckless. Yan Juexing looked at him blankly. He didn't know if Luo Xiaohan was complimenting him or if he already knew something. When enemies met, confrontation was inevitable. Luo Xiaohan smiled sinisterly. Yu Qianqiu, you haven't forgotten about me, right? Hee hee. I thought you were going to hide for the rest of your life and that I wouldn't have the chance to see you again. I didn't expect you to be so daring. You still dare to show yourself without the support of supporting Immortal Island. You're really courting death. His tone was sinister and filled with killing intent. The humiliation that Yu Qianqiu had brought him could only be washed away with his blood. Otherwise, he would be a laughing stock for the rest of his life. I also didn't expect you to have the guts to show yourself. The saying enemies are bound to meet on a narrow road is right. It's fate that I can run into you under such circumstances. Yu Qianqiu joked. He immediately shouted, Bastard, hurry up and make way for me. If you continue to be so long-winded, do you believe that I will still dare to beat you up even without the support of supporting Immortal Island? The demonic sects cooperated and burst into laughter. Some of the onlookers couldn't help but laugh too. Luo Xiaohan's body trembled. His expression twitched and he couldn't speak. He had the urge to attack. The people beside him quickly pulled him back. Yan Juexing frowned. Brother Luo, this is my 100 Flowers Valley. It's not a place for you to settle your personal grudges. I hope you can abide by the rules here. You're tuning into the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.